Yo, what's happening, y'all? We back. Moreh coming with some wonderful information about the history of Israel and Babylon and Assyria. But we also going to talk about the prophecy of Deuteronomy 28. Laron, stop the BS, man. You can't be coming around with the same old talk, with the Byzantine talk. I'm calling you out. We're going to have a debate on this forum about it. Bring your documentations and all of that. Because right now, Moreh going to bring the information. You're going to get to see the information he brings. I'm going to give you an opportunity to refute it. Don't run to the Vatican for help, Laron. The Vatican will not help you. All right? So look, Moreh, what you got for us, bro?
Shalom, shalom, brother. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, I can hear you, bro.
All right. Want to first and foremost give honor and praise to the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. Going to go over this presentation right here, and we're going to start in the scriptures, obviously, because that's the main source for Israelite history. So let's go to Jeremiah 44, if we will. Jeremiah chapter 44, verse 1. The word that came to Jeremiah concerning all the Jews that dwelt in the land of Egypt, that dwelt at Migdol and at Tapanhes, and at Noph, and in the country of Patros, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, You have seen all the evil that I have brought upon Jerusalem and upon all the cities of Judah, and behold, they this day are in a desolation, and no man dwelleth therein. So now this is speaking about after the era of what happened with the guy King Zedekiah. King Zedekiah being the last king of the tribe of Judah, right? Now, when we go into seeing what happened with the split of the kingdom, let's go to 1 Kings chapter 12, and we're going to start in verse 17 for edification purposes. 1 Kings, we are in chapter 12 and verse 17, and it says the following. But as for the children of Israel that dwelt in the cities of Judah, Rehoboam reigned over them. So what's being stated right there is Rehoboam was the son of Solomon, and he was the king that was ruling after the kingdom split between the southern kingdom of Judah and the northern kingdom of Israel. So we have to remember that there were Israelites that was of the northern kingdom, that was of those northern tribes that was living in the southern kingdom of Judah. That's very important, because then we can't sit there and say, oh, only Judah went to Babylon solely, and then only Israel went to Assyria solely. You understand? That's the point of that. So now, if that being the case, let's go into the book of Jeremiah chapter 50. We're going to start in Jeremiah chapter 50, verse 17. All right, so we can gain an understanding concerning that kind of matter. And it says the following. Israel is a scattered sheep. The lions have driven him away. First, the king of Assyria hath devoured him. And last, this Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, hath broken his bones. So what's being stated right here is that Israel is a scattered sheep. The lions have driven him away. The lions that drove Israel away, in this particular case, were the Babylonians, and prior to them, the Assyrians. So now, we already, for the most part, are in agreement that Judah was already, yes, taken to Babylon, but let's go and see what else happened. If you go to the book of 2 Kings, chapter 18, if we will. We are in 2 Kings, the 18th chapter. We're going to start in verse 13. Now, in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, did Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, come up against all the fortified cities of Judah, and took them. And Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to the king of Assyria to Lachish, saying, I have offended. Return for me that which thou puttest on me will I bear. And the king of Assyria appointed unto Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. So what's being stated right there emphatically is that in the timeline of what they have, what they call the Ragnul dating system, this is dated to the time of 700 or 701 BCE. That is to say, when King Sennacherib actually went and took people of the tribe of Judah and took them over into the land of Assyria. So that's very important to let that be noted and understood. So now Hezekiah was the son of King Ahaz. So now if you remember that, let's go into the understanding of why I'm mentioning that. When we go, brothers and sisters, into the book of 2 Kings 17, verse 1, we read, in the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, did Hosea the son of Elah to reign over Israel and reign 9 years. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Most High, yet not as the kings of Israel that were before him. Against him came up Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, and Hosea became his servant and brought him presents. So the point in me mentioning that particular aspect right there, brothers and sisters, is because Hosea was the king that was ruling over the northern tribes of Israel, he being the 20th king of the northern tribes of Israel, and when he went into captivity, the northern kingdom fell. So that right there is very, very important to let that be noted and understood. Now, to get back into this portion right here, and the king of Assyria found conspiracy in Hosea, for he has sent messengers to So, the king of Egypt, and brought no present to the king of Assyria, as he had done year by year. Therefore, the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison. Then the king of Assyria went up throughout all the land and went up to Samaria and besieged it 3 years. In the 9th year of Hosea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria and placed them in Halah and in Habor on the river of Gozan and in the cities of the Medes. And it was so, because the children of Israel had sinned against the Most High, who brought them up out of the land of Egypt, from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and feared other gods. So this right here is very, very important to let that be noted, what in the world is going on. The king of Assyria, this one right here being Shalmaneser or Shalmaneser the fifth, and you go into the annals of King Shalmaneser, he speaks about attacking the city of Samaria. But actually, when he passed away, it was his son and successor Sargon II that actually continued that campaign against the northern tribes of Israel. So what was going on politically in the world at that time, we're speaking in the 8th century BCE, and that is the fact that Israel was falling as a kingdom and Assyria was coming up as a kingdom. So now you had certain kings of Assyria. In this case, right, that we're speaking of is, as we went over, Shalmaneser, and after him Sargon. And after Sargon, you had Sennacherib. Sennacherib is the king that we read of in the book of 2 Kings 18. So all of this is confirmed via the scriptures and in the side of Assyrian history. So that's something right there that should be noted and understood. Now, the fact that you had Judah that was taken also into the captivity of the Assyrian people shows you good and well, brothers and sisters, that the people that were inside there of the northern, of the people that was in Assyria was not only the northern tribes of Israel, because Judah was there as well. So now, if we go, brothers and sisters, to the book of 2 Kings, chapter 24, verse 8, so that way we can gain an understanding concerning this kind of matter. 2 Kings, we are in the 24th chapter, 8th verse says, Jehoiachin was 18 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months, and his mother name was Nehushta, the daughter of Elnathan of Jerusalem. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Most High, according to all that his father had done. At that time, the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up to Jerusalem, and the city was besieged. And Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came unto the city while his servants were besieging it. And Jehoiachin, the king of Judah, went out to the king of Babylon, he and his mother and his servants and his princes and his officers. And the king of Babylon took him in the 8th year of his reign. So when it says in the 8th year of his reign, it's talking about in the 8th year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar. Now, this particular thing right here is when they call one of the first deportations of Israelites into the land of the Babylonians. So right here, very important to let it be noted what in the world is going on in the history of the world at that particular time. I have, for a cross-reference material book, if we will, I have a book here entitled Babylonian Life and History. Now I'm going to read part of it so that way we can gain an understanding of what we're talking about. It says the following on page 40. The Babylonians watched the decay of the Assyrian power, and when Ashurbanipal died, they set on the throne Nebuchadnezzar, who seems to have been a shrewd and capable ruler. He married his son Nebuchadnezzar II to the daughter of Cyaxares, king of the Medes, and when they invested Nineveh for the third time, he sent no troops to help the Assyrians to defend their capital. Nineveh fell in 612 BCE. So one of the things to sit there and let that be noted is that you had it to where Judah was already inside of the Assyrian captivity, partly, not all of Judah, but some of them from the city of Lachish and the other cities that you see that the king Sennacherib laid the claim to. Then you have it to where the northern tribes of Israel was already taken. We can go through the timeline. You had it to where in Tiglath-Pileser III. Then after him, you had Shalmaneser V. And then after him, you had Sargon. Then you had Shalmaneser. So Tiglath-Pileser, Tiglath-Pileser, Sennacherib, Sargon, Shalmaneser. That's exactly, Sennacherib. That was the last king of that particular aspect who took, as we read in the book of 2 Kings chapter 18, that took Judah into the Assyrian captivity. So now, when we get over, sorry for the mix-up and the confusion with my tongue being tied, but so now when we get back over into the time of the prophet Jeremiah, let's go to Jeremiah chapter 1. We're going to start in verse 1, and it says this: the words of Jeremiah, the son of Hilkiah, of the priests that were in Anatot in the land of Benjamin, to whom the word of the Most High came in the days of Josiah, the son of Ammon, king of Judah, in the 13th year of his reign. It came also in the days of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, to the end of the 11th year of Zedekiah, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, unto the carrying away of Jerusalem captive in the 5th month. So what's being stated right there is that it is speaking about the prophetic career, we may say, of the timing of the prophet Jeremiah. And so he was basically speaking in most cases to the people that was inside of the southern kingdom, for the most part. Not fully only to them, but for the most part. And how we can confirm that Jeremiah also spoke to Israelites in the northern kingdom is this. If we go into Jeremiah, right? Chapter 3, verse 12, it says the following: go and proclaim these words toward the north, and say, return, thou backsliding Israel, saith the Most High. I will not frown upon you, for I am merciful, saith Yah. I will not be a grudge forever. Only acknowledge thine iniquity, that thou hast transgressed against the Lord thy God, and hast scattered thy ways to the strangers under every leafy tree, and ye have not hearkened to my voice, saith Yah. Return, O backsliding children, saith Yah, for I am a Lord unto you, and I will take you one out of a city and two out of a family, and will bring you to Zion. And I will give you shepherds according to mine heart, who shall feed you with knowledge and understanding. And it shall come to pass, when ye are multiplied and increased in the land, in those days, saith the Most High, that they should say no more, the ark of the covenant of the Most High. Neither shall it come to mind, neither shall they make mention of it, neither shall they miss it, neither shall it be made any more. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out right here is that Jeremiah distinctly was told in this particular case to speak to the people that was in the north. And it says, return, O backsliding Israel. So if we're understanding, brothers and sisters, the chronology of the kings of Israel and Judah, we can see how all of this ties in. Because not all Israelites was taken into the Assyrian captivity. And there were people of Judah that was actually, believe it or not, taken into the Assyrian captivity. So some things like that should be noted and understood. Now I like to, with the time allotted, go over this particular aspect right here. And that is this here. This here is a map of the land of Israel, right? And what we're looking at, brothers and sisters, is this right here is the northern part. This here being the southern part, or that is to say, of Judah. This here is the Mediterranean Sea. So when the divided kingdom unfortunately did wind up happening, brothers and sisters, we see good and well that the people that was taken into the Assyrian captivity were not all the people of Israel or all the people of Judah. So how does all of that tie in to when we first started? Because there is a teaching going around, and this was to get to this point here. There is a teaching going around, brothers and sisters, that says that there was two dispersions. Basically, one being with the Assyrian and Babylon, and then the other one with the Romans. That right there is emphatically incorrect. And so how we know that to be the case is because Jeremiah began to prophesy while Babylon was still a kingdom. One. Secondly, when Babylon fell to the Medes and the Persians, we still have it to where there were Israelites that was scattered in the land of Egypt, that was of the tribe of Judah, and also from the other tribes of Israel as well. That is why I made a point to go into and read the book of 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 17, because it distinctly speaks about Israelites that was of the northern kingdom of Israel that was living in southern Judah. So when they try to sit there and come, no disrespect intended, by saying, okay, this chart that people are presenting, this has to be this according to the format, that right there is not biblically sound, because you had Judah that was also in Assyria. So when you had it to when Assyria fell, you understand? And Nebuchadnezzar defeated the people of the Assyrians with Ashur-banipal II. When that fell and he was cast off into the land of Haran, Babylon came up as a power. Nebuchadnezzar's son was Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was the one who was responsible, for the most part, for taking the people of Judah, that is to say the kingdom of Judah, and causing that to demolish from the era that happened with Jehoiachin, that we read of in 2 Kings chapter 24, and then on your own time, when you go to 2 Kings 25, you read about King Zedekiah and about them being deported over into the land of Babylon. So now, when we go back into the scriptures, and then we go up well and see, brothers and sisters, that in the scriptures, we're going to go to Jeremiah once again, chapter 50, but this time we're going to go to verse 33, and it said the following: Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the children of Israel and the children of Judah are oppressed together. All that took them captives hold them fast. They refuse to let them go. So this right here just goes to show you, it said the children of Israel and the children of Judah are oppressed together. So let that be noted and understood. Another point, brothers and sisters, is that we are speaking about what many people refer to as the Diaspora, or the scattering of the tribes of Israel. And it is not to be stated based upon fact that when the Medes and the Persians came up, when you had it to where Ezra was having his thing, and then Zechariah and Haggai were the prophets, and Nehemiah was one of the main people around that you read of in the Old Testament. You read about Nehemiah, you read about Ezra, you read about Zechariah, and you read about Haggai. So one of the things to be noted and understood, when they went back to build the temple, brothers and sisters, in what they call the 6th century BCE, that was not all of Israel and all of Judah. The gathering of the 12 tribes of Israel that we read of in Ezekiel chapter 37, and the gathering of the house of Israel that we read of in Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 10 says this: Hear ye the word of the Most High, O ye nations, and declare it in the isles afar off, and say, He that scattered Israel doth gather him. Says what? He that scattered Israel doth gather him, and keep him as a shepherd doth his flock. So when somebody attempts to state, unfortunately, that, oh, it was the southern kingdom that was scattered, it was Judah Judah, Benjamin, and the Levites that was scattered from one end of the earth to the other, and Israel stayed in the east. That's not accurate, because it distinctly says, he that scattered Israel doth gather him. So it's going to be the Most High that's going to sit there and gather the people. So let that be noted and understood. So just want to sit there and give that basic brief introduction before we get into the crux of the teaching that we're going to get into. Right now, I like to sit there, brothers and sisters, and I have a book for reference purposes And this particular book is called Atlas of Ancient Egypt. Now, how does that fit into what we're talking about by showing an Atlas of Ancient Egypt is because of what we read in the book of Jeremiah. And in this book here on page 51, we read something very, very interesting concerning some history with the Israelites. All right? And it says the following. So that way we can gain an understanding concerning this kind of matter right here. It says, like his predecessors, Apries supported the Palestinian states against Babylon. The Babylonian captivity of the Jews occurred during his reign, and many Jews fled to Egypt. From the next century, we have records of a Jewish colony in Elephantine. So, one of the things I wanted to point out is the fact that you have it to where they are actually speaking about Israelites, or as they say, Jews, that was inside of Elephantine. Now, this right here is an actual map, brothers and sisters, of the land of Egypt, as we see here. And here is where Elephantine is. This is going into what you call Upper Egypt, or what they call the Patros in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 44, verse 1 and 2. Okay, this is Upper Egypt, and this is this is Lower Egypt, which is the northern part, and this right here is the southern part, which the ancient Egyptians referred to as Upper Egypt. Why they did that is because of the flow of the Nile, which flows north. So the way they saw it was, this had to been the lower part, this had to been the upper part, because they saw the Nile flowing in the direction of north. All right, come to find out. So now, getting back to the point of what I wanted to sit there and state emphatically is that when we read about what they call the Jews in Elephantine Island, that right there is speaking emphatically about the Israelites that was in there. And there's all kinds of documentation concerning that. Now, I have a book here for reference purposes, right? It is called Hebrewisms of West Africa. And I want to go to page 269 concerning this kind of matter right here so we can gain some understanding. All right. It says, page 270, sorry. Elsewhere, Barton surmises, it has been conjectured that this colony, connected as it was with the fortress, was placed at this point by Samoctus II. While this theory cannot be confirmed, it seems quite probable, as the Deuteronomic law provides that there should be one sanctuary. It was plausibly conjectured that the temple at Elephantine was constructed after the destruction of the temple at Jerusalem in 586 BCE. In this temple, in the land of Egypt, Yahweh was worshipped under the name Yahu or Yahweh. So I wanted to sit there and get into this particular aspect right here, because the only way you're going to have people worshiping the Most High by that name and so forth and so on, and what they call the Elephantine Papyrus, the Passover Papyrus. We went over that particular subject even on the Alvin show before, so I don't want to be redundant. But you can go in your own time and look in the book entitled Ancient Near Eastern Texts, edited by James Pritchard, on page 280 and 281, and you will see emphatically that there were Israelites that was inside of the land of Egypt. All right, so let that be noted and understood. So when we speak about, and that right there is dated to when the Persians was ruling. So the point emphatically is to mention that when it says that the Most High will scatter Israel, we cannot sit there and just try to pinpoint it to solely one particular type of place. So the ideology, not to be harping on a dead horse, the ideology of teaching and saying that the Diaspora was gathered again during the era of the Medes and the Persians, that right there is emphatically incorrect, because all Israel was not gathered together. So let that be noted and understood. And as noted, there were Israelites who stayed in the land of Babylon. So this is how this dispersion actually occurred. Okay, now I want to go, brothers and sisters, into the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 29, verse 27. We're going to let the scripture speak. Deuteronomy, the 29th chapter, we're going to start at verse 27. So we can see what the Israelite record itself says of its own self. All right? We read the following. No, let's start in 26. So therefore the anger of the Most High was kindled against this land to bring upon it all the curse that are written in this book. So when it says all of the curses that's written in this book, we're going to get into that in a minute, like the brother Alvin was saying, right? It says, and the Most High rooted them, meaning Israel, out of their land in anger and in wrath and in great indignation, and cast them into another land as it is this day. So the fact that we're reading, according to the Israelite record, that they was going to be cast into another land, that means a land outside of their own land. And when they was cast into that other land, their customs in many cases was not going to be able to be followed. Their traditions in many cases was not going to be able to be followed. Their language wound up dying out from the people. And so that's why you find people today saying like Hebrew is like a dead language. The scriptures that the Israelites were abiding by, that's called the Old Testament. And so these kind of things and these kind of ploys, let it be noted and understood that this is because Israel forsook the ways of the Most High. So now let's go and see what Solomon said. We're going to move not too fast, but so that way people be able to understand what in the world is being presented. Let's go to 1 Kings chapter 8. We're going to start in verse 46. And it says the following. If they, being in Israel, if they sin against thee, meaning the Most High, if Israel sins against the Most High, for there is no man that sinneth not, and thou be angry with them, and deliver them to the enemy, so that they carry them away captive unto the land of the enemy, far off or near. Yet, if they shall bethink themselves in the land where they were carried captive, and turn back, and make supplication unto thee, in the land of them that carried them captive, saying, we have sinned, we have done iniquitously, we have dealt wickedly. If they return unto thee with all their heart and all their soul in the land of their enemies, who carried them captive, and pray unto thee toward their land, which thou gavest unto their fathers, the city which thou hast chosen, and the house which I have built for thy name, then hear thou their prayer and their supplication in heaven, thy dwelling place, and maintain their cause, and forgive your people who have sinned against you, and all their transgressions wherein they have transgressed against you, and give them compassion before those who carry them captive, that they may have compassion on them. For they, meaning Israel, for they are your people and your inheritance, which thou broughtest forth out of the land of Egypt, out of the midst of the furnace of iron. So I wanted to sit there and go over that particular aspect right there to let it be noted and understood what Solomon was talking about. He's saying in his prayer there that if Israel was to sin against the Most High, and that they are delivered to the hand of their enemy, and that the Most High caused them to be carried away captive by the hand of their enemy, far or near, where would Solomon have got this kind of understanding from? What makes Solomon even mention these kind of words? Remember, let's go, brothers and sisters, to the book of 1 Kings, if we will. We are in 1 Kings chapter 2, so that way we can gain an understanding. Now the days of David drew nigh that he should die, and he charged Solomon his son, saying, I go the way of all the earth. Be thou strong therefore, and show thyself a man, and keep the charge of the Lord thy God, to walk in his ways, and to keep his statutes, and his commandments, and his ordinances, and his testimonies, according to all that is written in the law of Moses, that thou mayest prosper in all that thou doest, and whithersoever thou turnest thyself. And Yah may establish his word which he spoke concerning me, saying, if thy children take heed to their way to walk before me, the Most High, in truth, with all their heart and with all their soul, there shall not fail thee, saith he, a man to sit upon a man on the throne of Yisrael. So one of the things I wanted to point out is because when before David passed away, he was telling Solomon his son to remember the things that Moshe or Moses taught the people of Israel. When you go in the book of 1 Kings, 1 Kings chapter 2, it tells you right there. So what did the prophet Moses say that correlates to what we read in the book of 1 Kings 8? Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 27. And it reads on this wise. Deuteronomy 4:27. And here's what we read. it says the following. And the Most High shall scatter you among the peoples, and you shall be left few in number among the nations, whither the Most High shall lead you away. And there you shall serve gods, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see, nor hear, nor eat, nor smell. But from thence you will seek the Most High thy King, and thou shalt find him if thou search after him with all thy heart and with all thy soul. In thy distress, when all these things are come upon thee, in the end of days, thou wilt return unto the Lord thy God, and hearken unto his voice. For the Lord thy God is a merciful God. He will not fail thee, nor destroy thee, nor forget the covenant of thy fathers, which he swore unto them. So what's being stated, this is from the prophet Moshe, or Moses, to the children of Israel. So what he's emphatically speaking of right here is that Israel will be scattered if they didn't keep the law, statutes, and the commandments of the Most High from one end of the earth to the other. And while they're among those nations, they're going to serve gods of wood and stone. And in thy distress, when all these things are come upon thee, it is talking about Israel is dealing, unfortunately, under the curses while they are scattered outside of their land. So losing the land itself was not the only curse or the main form of the curse. It was all encompassed within one thing, because it says, as we went over in another presentation, all these curses shall come upon thee and shall pursue thee and overtake thee. So we have to sit there and see who in the history of their own people happened to fulfill this. What people was cast out of their own land and scattered into another land? And how does this relate to now? Because getting back, brother and sister, the book of 1 Kings chapter 8 verse, we're going into verse 46, one more time for a reason. If they sin against thee, for there is no man that sinneth not, and thou be angry with them and deliver them to the enemy, so that they carry them away captive unto the land of the enemy, far off or near. So Solomon never made a distinction between how far Israel probably in his prayer would have been carried off as captives. You know why Solomon didn't give no distinction? Because David, his father, told him to go according to the laws of the prophet Moshe. And when you read in those scriptures under Moshe, there is no distinction about how far Israel was going to be carried captive when you read in the Torah. So now let's go, if you go back into Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, if you will. We're going to go into a couple of parts, so that way we can let it be noted and understood. Go to Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 21, so we can gain an understanding concerning this kind of matter. And it says the following: the Most High will make the pestilence cleave unto thee, until he has consumed thee from off the land, whether you goest in to possess it. So this is talking to not the whole world. This is talking about the Most High's relation with the nation of Israel. It says that when Israel goes in to possess the land, if they're not keeping the laws, the statutes, and the commandments of Yah, that he was going to cause the pestilence to cleave unto the house of Israel. So what is the pestilence that came upon the house of Israel? The pestilence was called Moabites, Edomites, Syrians, Egyptians, Philistines, Ammonites, Babylonians, Assyrians, Medes, Greeks, Romans. All right? It said the Lord will make the pestilence cleave unto thee, until he has consumed thee from off the land, whether thou goest in to possess it. So if we understand what the Bible and what the scriptures is teaching, it is talking about a history of a particular people. All right? Now, let's go into verse 25. The Lord will cause thee to be smitten before thine enemies. Thou shalt go out one way against them, and shalt flee 7 ways before them. And thou shalt be a horror to all the kingdoms of the earth. And thy carcasses shall be food unto all the fowls of the air, and unto the beasts of the earth. And there shall be none to frighten them away. Now, in many Bibles, it says in Deuteronomy 28, verse 25, that you shall be removed to all the kingdoms of the earth. However, I read the word horror because in Hebrew, it uses the Hebrew word, the awa, which basically means that you shall be a horror to all the kingdoms of the earth. And so now let's understand, going according, line upon line, precept upon precept, what are these kingdoms of the earth that Israel was going to be a horror to? Let's go, brothers and sisters, to the book of, keep your hand on Deuteronomy 28, right? We're going to go to the book of Daniel, chapter 7, so we can see and gain some understanding about this kind of matter. We are in Daniel, the 7th chapter. We're going to start in verse 1. But keep your hand on Deuteronomy 28. And remember that it says that Israel will be a horror to all the kingdoms of the earth. It says, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spoke and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heaven broke forth upon the great sea. And four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made to stand upon 2 feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Now this right here in verse 4 is speaking about Babylon. Babylon was that image that then the prophet Daniel saw right here. You understand? It says, the first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked off. The lion image in ancient Babylon was very significant to the ancient people of Babylon when you go and you research the archaeology and the walls of Babylon and so forth and so on, right? I beheld till wings thereof were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth, meaning that Babylon was made to stand upon its own ground. They basically, when it says, and a man's heart was given to it, that man's heart was given to it was the courage, basically, that Nebuchadnezzar had to go and try to take over the world, or to be, in his own definition, a conqueror of the known world. So Babylon came up in the light of the knowledge of being an Israelite when Nebuchadnezzar, the son of Nabopolassar, under 605 BCE, and fell in the year 538 BCE. And then you had it to where Media and Persia came up as a kingdom from 538 into 331 BCE. So we already going over how Assyria was part of the kingdom that fell. Babylon came up as a kingdom after Assyria, after you had Babylonians ruling in Assyria and Assyria ruling in Babylon. Well, basically, after the era with Nabopolassar, the father of Nebuchadnezzar, basically Assyria got smashed. You understand? And then you had Babylon coming up. The last Babylonian king was Belshazzar, aka Nabonidus, who was the king that was defeated by Cyrus II. This is Cyrus II who sired, that is the guy Cambyses. Cambyses is the guy that was ruling in Egypt under the 27th dynasty of Egypt. So when you go into your own studies and you read about Bagaos, B-A-G-A-O-S, that is during the Medo-Persian Empire. And he was the person that was responsible when the Israelites in Elephantine Island, where we went over before, sent an emissary to the Persian king. You see, all of that history is very important in order to gain an understanding concerning what we're talking about. Because we already read that the Most High was sent a pestilence that will cause Israel to be cast away from the land in Deuteronomy 28, verse 21. So that process began to happen even before the Assyrians came up. Israel was already being scattered. That is why you can trace the era of what happened with King Ahab when Israel was still a kingdom within their own right. And the Israelites under his jurisdiction being associated with Shalmaneser III, the king of Assyria. This was also during the same time when you had it to where Israelites scattered over in their own volition, come to find out, and by transport via slavery to other lands. So it's very, very important to let that be noted and understood. The people of Carthage was a mixture of different peoples that were Canaanites and Israelites. We went over that last time in the Brother Alvin show, not to be redundant. Let's move on. Daniel chapter 7, verse 5. And behold, another beast a second, like to a bear, and it raised itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And it was said thus unto it, arise, devour much flesh. So this is talking about the Medo-Persian Empire that came up. Now, in the mind of the house of Israel, this is why it's very important. You understand? Now, these particular nations and kingdoms, they had their own jurisdiction, their own rulership, their own language, and their own culture prior to coming in contact with the house of Israel. But when we read about those particular people inside the Israelite record, that's today called the Bible, we have to understand it to a certain extent from the Israelite authorship. That's important to understand Deuteronomy 28, verse 68, when it says that the Most High will bring you back into Egypt again in ships. Because if you don't understand what Egypt means in the Israelite mind, you off. So now let's understand how that particular presentation I just said connects to Daniel 7, verse 5. Medo-Persia came up as a kingdom, and it says that the bear stood up on one side. The bear that stood up on one side represents that the Persians was going to be stronger than that of the Medes. When the Medes and the Persians came together as an empire was in the 6th century BCE. That happened to be when Babylon was still ruling in the year 550 BCE, because you had it to where Cyrus made a league and had the Median Persian, or pardon me, had the Medes incorporated into his empire, when you had it to where Astyages of the Medes was defeated, and they made a conglomerate uniform between Cyrus and Astyages of the Medes. So now that was during when Babylon was still an empire. So now by the time the Israelites come in contact with the Medes and the Persians, you read about that, the Medes and the Persians, the Medes and the Persians, you read that in Ezra, you read that in Esther, and you read that in the book of Daniel. However, prior to 550 BCE, the Medes and the Persians were two separate people. But by the time the Israelites came into being with in a conglomerate, or in a circumference, that is, with the Medes and the Persians was one kingdom. So when Daniel had the vision of the dreams upon his bed, and it said the beard stood up on one side, this beard represented the Medo-Persian Empire. That's important because all of the times people, no offense intended, they seem to want to be quote unquote politically correct and not understand history in its proper context. When you're reading in the scriptures, you have to understand the mind and the historical factor that the ancient Israelites were coming from. You understand? This is why when you go in the book of Exodus, chapter 1, verse 11 to verse 15, it says they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. But when you read about the captivity of Israel in the 13th dynasty of Egypt, there was no city called Ramses or Ramses. That was the name that the author knew of that same city. That's called an anachronism, when the author of the Torah was writing it at that particular time for the record to be left. So then you have to see, okay, if Ramses was called that in the time when Samuel and David and all of them was scribes and writing out the Torah, they called the name of the city according to the name of it at that particular time of the author of it. So let's see, inside of Egyptian records, if you will, Ramses at one time was called Perufer. Another time it was called Rorati. You understand? And later on, when the Greeks came along, we now see it called the city of Avaris. But the Israelites called that particular whole land the land of Goshen. So this is why linguistics, etymology, language, and dates and times, and knowing who is being this author and who is being spoken to and who is being spoken about is very important. Because there's a lot of arguments that occur due to the fact that the people do not know who was the speaker, who was being spoken to, who was intended, the first, second, and third person of the conversation. That's very important to let that be noted and pointed out. Now, getting back, if you will, to the book of Daniel, chapter 7, verse 5. And behold, another beast, a second like to a bear, and it raised itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. The 3 ribs in the mouth of the Medo-Persian Empire, okay, is speaking about Lydia, of the people of Lud. Lud, L-U-D, when you go to the book of Chronicles, was one of the descendants of the Shemite people. So Lydia was conquered by them in the year 549 BCE. Egypt was another rib in between there, and you read in Daniel 7 verse 5. That was conquered by the Medes and the Persians in the year 525 BCE. And then we had Babylon that was conquered in 539 BCE. So the 3 ribs between the mouth of the bear is Lydia, Babylon, and Egypt. So that right there has to be noted and understood. Yes, the Medes and the Persians had wars even in addition to and before the time of coming in contact with the children of Israel in their own individual kingdoms. But Daniel was an Israelite. And let me point this out. The book of Daniel, chapter 12, verse 1. All right, so we can gain an understanding concerning this kind of matter. Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, and it says the following. At that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince was standing for the children of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. So when this is a vision given to the prophet Daniel, and it says that, and at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which stands for the children of your people. Who's the people of Daniel? Your shows possession. So it's the people of Israel. Now let's go to Daniel chapter 9 inside the 11th verse, so we can see exactly more correlation concerning that kind of matter. The 11th verse of chapter 9 of the book of Daniel, and we read as follows, and it says the following. Yea, all Israel have transgressed thy law, and have turned aside. Now, I read that part. Now, let's jump to verse 10. It says, neither have we hearkened to the voice of the Lord our God to walk in his ways. So when Daniel in his prayer is saying, we have not kept the laws, the statutes, and the commandments of the Most High, and then the next verse in Daniel chapter 9, 9th chapter, verse 11, it says, all Israel, that we is all Israel. Daniel was an Israelite from the tribe of Judah. So when it says Mikael standing up for the children of your people that is talking about there is the children of Israel. Let's go into the book of Daniel chapter 7. We're going to go down into verse 21. And it says, I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them, until the Ancient of Days came, and the judgment was given for the saints of the Most High, and the time came, and the saints possessed the kingdom. So it says that the time came, and the saints possessed the kingdom. The kingdom that is talking about is the same kingdom that the book of Obadiah talks about when it says that Israel will be the head of the nations. It's the same kingdom that the book of Isaiah chapter 60 is talking about. You understand? So now, getting back into understanding who are the saints of the Most High, let's go to the book of Psalms, or Tehillim, 148. We're going to start in Psalms 148, verse 14. And it reads as follows. And he had lifted up a horn for his people, a praise for all his saints, even for the children of Israel, a people near unto him. Hallelujah. Now, I want to sit there and go over a particular point, because when brothers before try to sit there and go and explain Psalms 148, verse 14, when it says, a praise for all your saints, even for the children of Israel, some people were trying to be, I guess, sarcastic or smart or offensive and say, no, it says even for Israel. So it says the saints, even for Israel. In other words, there's a difference between the saints being the Israelites of the Most High. But let's see what the scriptures itself says. Let's go to the book of Tehillim, or Psalms 148, verse 14. So that way we can see what it says in the Hebrew, so we can gain an understanding. All right, and here is what we read. It says as follows. Wayarem kweren le'amo, tehila lokol kasidayo, libne Yisrael, am korobo hallelujah. So the key point is this right here. When you see this Hebrew word right here, kasidayo, his saints or his holy ones, libne, to the children of Yisrael, libne, to the children of Yisrael, Israel. So the word even, E-V-E-N, that's why when you see in a lot of King James versions, the word even is in italics, because that's not even what the Hebrew itself says. But if we also understand the fact of biblical language, it is not saying that the saints is not the children of Israel. We just read in the Hebrew right there, it says that he lifted up a horn for his people, of praise for all his saints, the children of Israel. So Daniel was an Israelite. So all of this, it might seem okay, he's going a little slower than usual and doing a presentation, because I want to sit there and try to make a point run home, Most High bless. Daniel was an Israelite. Daniel chapter 12, verse 1 and 2, when it says the children of your people, is talking about the children of Israel. So the saints that will receive the kingdom, when you go into the book of Daniel chapter 7, is the same children of Israel that's going to be gathered from the four corners of the earth. All right, now, if we go back, brothers and sisters, we want to get back into Daniel 7 with the Greeks and the Romans, but I just wanted to sit there and stop off with the Medes and the Persians for a minute before we move on, and go back, if we will, to Deuteronomy 28, and let's start once again in verse 21. The Lord shall make the pestilence cleave unto thee, until he has consumed thee from off the land, whether thou goest in to possess it. So this right here is a description of what will happen. So when Israel was going to be scattered from one end of the earth to the other, Deuteronomy 28 gives us clues, we may say, of what will happen when the people will be scattered. And here's what it is. Let's go, if you will, to verse 27. The Lord shall smite thee with the boil of Egypt, and with the emerods, and with the scab, and with the itch, whereof thou canst not be healed. So let's understand something. The children of Israel that Moses was speaking to in that particular time right there were the Israelites that just came out of the land of Egypt and their children. So their immediate children. So the only thing they knew was, in their own life, the Sinai in Egypt. The Sinai in Egypt. That's all they knew. So if the Israelites were going to be told that they will go into captivity, what other example would the prophet Moses give outside of saying the place where you just came out of being a captive? So let that be noted and understood. All right? It says, the Most High shall smite thee with madness and with blindness and with astonishment of heart. And thou shalt grope at noonday, as the blind gropeth in darkness. And thou shalt not make thy ways prosperous. And thou shalt only be oppressed and robbed always, and there shall be none to save thee. So who is going to sit there and save our people? Who is going to be the delegate that's going to sit there and save our people? Daniel chapter 12 says what? It says that the great prince Michael, which stands for the children of the house of Israel, that's going to be that one when that time comes. But as far as it stands now, it has not come to pass yet. So the gathering of the 12 tribes of Israel has not happened yet. The gathering of the dispersion has not happened yet. So let that be noted and understood. Okay? It says in verse 29, and thou shalt grope at noonday, as the blind gropeth in darkness, and thou shalt not make thy ways prosperous. So that means that this people, whoever Deuteronomy 28 is talking about, is going to be a people that they're going to be smitten with madness, blindness, and astonishment of heart. And they shall grope at noonday, like the blind gropeth in darkness. Are you prospering in your ways? No. Do you have any goals and ambitions? Because it tells you in Proverbs, where there is no vision, the people perish. So if you're smitten with blindness, that means you ain't got no vision. So where do you see yourself 5 years from now? I don't know. I'm out on the corner chilling. What it be, son? That's what the scriptures right here is talking about. It goes on to say, and thou shalt grope at noonday, as the blind gropeth in darkness, and thou shalt not make thy ways prosperous, and thou shalt only be oppressed and robbed always, and there shall be none to save thee. Thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. Thou shalt build the house, and shall not dwell therein. Thou shalt plant a vineyard, and shall not use the fruit thereof. Thine ox shall be slain before thine eyes, and thou shalt not eat thereof. Thine ass shall be violently taken away from before thy face, and shall not be restored to thee. Thy sheep shall be given unto thine enemies, and thou shalt have none to save thee. So basically, when it's talking about sheep and oxen and your ass, that is to say, like your donkey, these are the things that the Israelites use for food, for transportation. These are the things that the Israelites use for commerce, for tithing. Let the people in the church know, as many Israelites do, tithing is not money. Tithing is of the increase. So let that be noted and understood. You shall plant a vineyard and shall not use the fruit thereof. So what it's talking about is basically some of the things that's going to be coming upon the Israelites economically, socially. That was going to be broken down. This can't be the Jewish man, because the Jewish man runs the loan business. The Jewish man runs the meat packing industry. The Jewish man runs the book publication authorship. The Jewish man runs these kind of organizations. So Deuteronomy 28 cannot be the people that the prophet Moses was, when Moses was talking about Deuteronomy 28, can't be talking about the Jewish man we see today, because you can look and see who the curses fell upon and who the curses did not fall upon. Who is the biggest consumer? Black man, woman, and child. Western Hemisphere. Who is the biggest borrower and yet at the same token the biggest spender? The black man, woman, and child in America. Who does not have the land that their ancestors had? The black man, woman, and child in the Americas. Who is driven mad for the sight which their eyes see? Read Nathan McCall's book, Makes Me Want to Holler, A Black Man in America. So, if we're not just going upon this based upon assumptions or speculation, we're going based upon this, based upon the Most High God and His word that was left on record. And this is why you have it to where the Sephardic Jews and the Ashkenazi Jews and so forth, they can't sit there and go into the scriptures like that. So they have the Talmud, they have their Shulchan Aruch, they have their Gemara, their Mishnah, which mix up the Talmud between the Gemara and the Mishnah. They have their Zohar, they have their Book of Raziel, they have all these other doctrines that are supposed to supplement with the Torah because they can't go into Torah and explain how it fits in with their history. You understand? So all of that is very, very important to let that be noted and understood. Now, Deuteronomy 28, verse 45, we see the following. And all these curses shall come upon thee, and shall pursue thee and overtake thee, till thou be destroyed, because you did not hearken unto the voice of the Most High, to keep his commandments and his statutes which he commanded thee. And they, meaning the curses, and they shall be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder, and upon thy seed forever. So it is not by an assumption or speculation. It said these curses shall be upon thy seed. Do you know what seed is? That's not spiritual. This is a physical seed. It says that these things shall be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder. Some of those things we already read. Madness, blindness, astonishment of heart, mad for the sight that thine eyes shall see, plucked from your land. Let's go to verse 37 so we can gain more understanding of some of these curses. It says what? And thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword. Byword, let's go in. African American, a term created in the 1980s. Colored, a term that was used in the 17 and 1800s. Nigger, a term that was used in the 16 and 1700s. Black, a term that became popular in the 1960s. Negro, a term that was used in the 1930s and before that for the same people. So you had a people that was called nigger, Negro, colored, African American, West Indian, and none of these names are of our ancestors. Our ancestors did not know these names. We were given these names by our enemies. You understand? So when the Sephardic Jew or the Ashkenazi Jew lays claim to something, he's not giving up his Japhetic European heritage. Ashkenaz is from Japhet. He knows that. He is not reneging on his heritage. He just wanted to sit there and act like he the people. And we're going to get into how that came about in history as well. But getting back into this particular subject right here, it says the following as such. And thou shalt become an astonishment. That's how we are. We are an astonishment to the people. Y'all don't get enough, huh? We lynch you. We tell you to abort your babies. But you still want to marry our women? That's an astonishment. We make movies about enslaving you. But you still think that we all should be one. That's an astonishment. And it says, a proverb among the people. I heard about the Israelites in history, but I don't know what happened to them. And that's what Deuteronomy 29 talks about, because it says when Israel will be uprooted out of their land and placed into another land. That's how it all correlates, because when you go into what we read in the book of 1 Kings chapter 8 in the prayer, and it says, you read that, and then you read earlier as we did in Deuteronomy 4, Solomon was rehearsing the same thing that Deuteronomy 4 is talking about. When they are placed into another land, serving gods of wood and stone, if they come back and pray to the Most High God. Now, I have a book here I want to use for reference. And this is called Black Culture and Black Consciousness, written by Lawrence Levine. And on page 41 in this book, here's something we're going to read to gain an understanding. It says, Amanda McCrae testified that on her Florida plantation, there was a praying ground where the grass never had a chance there to grow for the troubled knees that kept it crushed down. And Andrew Moss remembered that on the Georgia plantation where he grew up, all the slaves had their private prayer grounds. My mammy's was an old, twisted, thick-rooted muscadade bush. She'd go there and pray for deliverance of the slaves. Even here, the slaves are often discovered by white patrols. Then they would rush in and start whipping and beating the slaves unmerciful. Wes Turner of Virginia reported, and do you know what some of them devils was mean and sinful enough to say? If I catch you here serving God, I'll beat you. You ain't got no time to serve God. We brought you to serve us. Now, this is directly from a slave narrative book entitled Black Culture and Black Consciousness. So we're going to sit there and see how all the Deuteronomy 28 connects with us over here within the Western Hemisphere. All right. It says what? According to this, black culture and black consciousness, under the subtitle, The Sacred World of the Black Slaves, it says that the grass did not have time to grow because the people was kneeling upon it, repetitively praying for deliverance of the slaves. And then it says, what? That when they was caught by the white patrols, that the slaves will be beaten, and was told, if we catch you here serving God, I'll beat you. You ain't got no time to serve God. We brought you here to serve us. So who was carried away captive to the land of their enemies? Even West Turner in this book here called the enslaver or the slave master a devil. A devil, it has to be an enemy to you if you're calling that person that. So it says, according to that particular slave narrative, that the people were flogged, were whipped for praying. When you go into Alex Haley's book entitled Roots, it speaks about, and other authors have spoken about it as well, when our people used to pray inside of pots, so that way the prayer won't be heard by the European people. So now, this man, our oppressor, knows that Old Testament. He knows this book. You understand? So now, when we go in the book of 1 Kings chapter 8, and it says, if they pray toward you, O Most High, hear thou their prayer in heaven. And so they was not trying to have our people return back to that Old Testament God. No, because he's the same one who brought the ancient Israelites out of the land of Egypt. And if you don't think Egyptian records speak about it, it does. When you go into what they call the Imperial Papyrus, a whole nother subject. We went over that in the last discussion with this, entitled Tanakh, Hebrew, and History. All right? Also on the Brother Alvin's channel. So now, getting back into this particular point right here, knowing good and well that our people always knew that prayer and that there was a power in it, they always tried to sit there and, one, control how we prayed, and two, who we prayed to, and three, the fact that they did not even want us to be praying. That's very, very important to let that be noted and understood. Our people were not atheists when we were brought over here to the Western Hemisphere. Atheism is not a concept of our ancestors. You understand? Now, getting back, if you will, to Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, we're going to start this time in verse 43. The stranger that is in the midst of thee shall mount above thee higher and higher, and thou shalt come down lower and lower. He shall lend to thee, thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail. Who had to sit at the tail of the bus? Our people, the black people in the Western Hemisphere. Who was the one that was revered as the head? The European people, the ones who brought us over here. The stranger that is in the midst of thee shall mount above thee higher and higher. Every single people who come into where we are, they get the stores, they get the grants, they get the loans, they amount above us higher and higher. And we come down lower and lower. It says, he shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. Don't we realize that being self-sufficient is very important? And when you're not self-sufficient, it's a part of a curse. It's a part of being brought down low. It tells you that in Psalm 79. It says, for we are brought very low. So these curses followed us from our scattering and also when we were carried captive. All of that is very important to let that be noted and understood. Now, for anybody who tries to sit there, no offense intended, and tries to insinuate or give the idea that the European Jew is the real Jews, let's get into some history, if we will. Now, I want to read a secular reference. I have an article. It is written by Tony Thorpe, all right? And part of it reads as follows. It says this: Caucasian Jews are not the lineal descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And this is true. And this is why when you got Kemetic brothers teaching that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob never existed, the Jewish man sits there and be quiet because he know he ain't from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So he ain't sitting there sweating that. He's not going to sit there and say, oh, I got to go ride, as they say, ride hard, go hard with it, defend your position. Jewish man don't sit there and defend that position because he know he ain't the people of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's why Arthur Koestler wrote his book, The 13th Tribe. Because if y'all was any part of Israel, y'all not from the 12 tribes. And Jacob only had 12 sons that became the 12 tribes. Dinah is not a tribe. Okay, it says Caucasian Jews are not the lineal descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. nor do they constitute a separate race, but rather a religious fraternity which adhere to the ethnic tradition of a people whose origins are inextricably linked to Black Africa. So that is to say that the people of the Caucasian Jews, they are attempting to follow a way that belongs to Black people that would have been indigenous of the place that we call Africa, in this particular case, namely Northeast Africa, the land of Israel. All right, now, when the children of Israel, part of their scattering, we're going to sit there and see what one particular author says concerning this. One of the people whom they like to quote, Dr. Ben, and I'm going to read part of the quote of what he says. These African Jews, as all other Romanized Africans of this era, were caught in a rebellion in Cyrene in 115 BC, 115 AD against Roman imperialism and colonialism. This rebellion also marked the beginning of a mass Jewish migration across the Sudan or West Africa. Along the way, the city of Ir and into the countries of Fouta Djallon and Senegambia, which lie below the parabolic curve of the Niger River's most northern reaches, where the city of Timbuktu, Mali, presently stands. African Origins of Major Western Religions by Dr. Ben, 1970, page 76. Dr. Ben goes on to relate that the Black Israelite immigrants from northern and eastern Africa merged with the indigenous groups in western Africa to become the Fulani of Fouta Djallon, Kornem, Bornu, and Lake Chad. They also formed the parent stock of groups such as the Ashanti, the Hausa, the Bene Ephraim, and the Mavombo. All of these groups suffered tremendous population decreases during the years of the Atlantic slave trade was in operation. Others were completely eliminated. Thus, every so-called African American has Israelite ancestry in their family tree, whether he or she knows it or not. So, the point of me wanting to go over that particular subject just goes to let it be noted that when the children of Israel scattered, in many cases they scattered to the western shores of Africa, fleeing from Greek and Roman persecution. Now, when I tried to make this point before in a presentation, I didn't fully get my whole point across because of time, but the whole point of what I'm trying to state concerning that kind of matter is this, and this is not Black supremacy. I'm quoting scholars, okay, and references and sources and validating the claims. Supremacy, Black supremacy, as well as white supremacy, is based upon not citing any sources, trying to down somebody else, trying to disrespect anybody else, trying to talk about, oh, your skin peels in the sun and my skin doesn't. That could be called Black supremacy. But the fact that the children of Israel descended from Black people and remain Black is not Black supremacy. That's called a truth. And so therefore, pardon that, and therefore concerning that particular subject matter, it's very, very important to let it be noted and understood what we're talking about. Going back, if we will, into how anybody else would have gotten any claim or quote to it. Let's go to the book of Obadiah. Go to Obadiah chapter 1, which only has one chapter. We're going to go in verse 11. Now this right here is talking about the children of Esau, the Edomites. Let's go in history. In that day, in the day that thou didst stand aloof, in the day that strangers carried away his substance, and foreigners entered into his gates, and cast lots upon Jerusalem, even thou wast as one of them. So, but thou should have not had gazed on the day of thy brother, and the day of his disaster. Neither shouldst thou have rejoiced over the children of Judah in the day of their destruction. Neither shouldst thou have spoken proudly in the day of distress. So this is the Most High speaking through Obadiah concerning the children of the Edomites. The Edomites were the people, as it says there, in the day that strangers carried away his substance, even now was as one of them. Let's go to Jeremiah 49. So that way line upon line and precept upon precept. Jeremiah the 49th chapter, we're going to start in verse 7. Thus saith the Most High of hosts, is wisdom no more in Teman? Is counsel perished from the prudent? Is their wisdom vanished? Flee ye, turn back, dwell deep, O inhabitants of Dedan. For I do bring the calamity of Esau upon him, the time that I will punish him. If grape gatherers come to thee, will they not leave some gleaning grapes? If these by night, will they not destroy till they have enough? So when you see something about Esau in Jeremiah as well as in Obadiah, it speaks about them as being thieves, people who stole something. So when did that particular type of thing happen? And who are the Edomites in history? And who was the stranger that laid a snare under Esau when you go into the book of Obadiah? This has to be pointed out. Why? Because it's in the Bible. So let's talk about that. Now, brothers and sisters, I have a reference book entitled The Bible is History by Ian Wilson. I used to say the name is Ian Wilson, but my sister said it's really pronounced as Ian Wilson. So we're going to go into this book right here by Ian Wilson entitled The Bible is History. We're going to go into page 176. And here is what we read. Archaeology yet again confirms the biblical picture. For from the Arad fortress that was built after Sennacherib's destruction, broken bits of pottery have survived with the last records of its apparently still structurally Yahweh's community. Commander Eliashib, sorry. It says, let me read that over. Archaeology has yet again confirms this biblical picture. For the Arad fortress that was built after Sennacherib's destruction, broken bits of pottery have survived, with the last records of its apparent still staunchly Yahweh's commander Eliashib. That is to say that when this particular Israelite leader named Eliashib, he was one of the last people that was to proclaim the name of the Most High in that particular area. And this is going over the era of Obadiah chapter 1. It says this, among these is a partly lost message to him from a neighboring fortress which specifically warns to Eliashib. I want to sit there and let this be noted and seen. Here's what we're reading. It says, to Eliashib, the word of the king is incumbent on you for your very life. Behold, I have sent to warn you today. Ramat Negeb has to be defended, lest Edom should come there. Lest Edom should come there. So, understand something. When Babylon fell, Edom was already trying to get their way inside of the land of Israel. So, let that be noted and understood. And if you sit there and you take the time out, brothers and sisters, if you care to, you can see and know and understand that Edom was, by the time you get to the era when the Greeks come into power, here's Edom right here. The Idumeans. Idumea is Edom. So this is now, by the time the Greek Empire come into play, you see the children of Esau right inside of the land of Israel. And here's another aspect so we can gain some understanding. Idumea, the Edomites. This is within the land of Israel. So when we just sat there and read and shown in the map that by the time Babylon done fell and during the Medo-Persian era, and then we did later on see by the time the Greek come into power, the Maccabees era and everything like that, the Idumeans were already inside of the land of Israel. Israel, the land, was wanted by the Edomites for a very, very long time. So now, going along with this particular thing as we've been following along in history, the Edomites were friends with the people of Greece, and then later on friends with the people of Rome. We went over this inside of another presentation. You understand? So now, if we will gain some understanding, let's go back to the book of Daniel, chapter 7. We're going to start in verse 6, so we can gain some understanding concerning that. And it says as follows. After this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the sides of it 4 wings of a fowl, and the beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. This right here is speaking about the Greek Empire. This leopard that had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. The Greek Empire had a very, very vast territory, extending all the way from what you call Macedonia, going all the way into India, going all the way into what you call the land of Egypt, and so forth and so on. All of that and then some more land was actually the territory of the Greeks. Now, in history, how it ties in with the nation of Israel is that you had Alexander, that was the son of Philip of Macedon, and he was one of their greatest conquerors. And he was born in the 4th century BCE. They say, if I remember right, 353 or 352 BCE, and he died in the year 323 BCE. You understand? So now, getting into that particular subject right there, Alexander, the son of Philip of Macedon, when he passed away, his generals came after him. That is to say, Cassander, Ptolemy, Lysimachus, and Seleucus, and Antigonus. Now, to show you how the book of Daniel is not biased, but is basically speaking about history from the Israelite perspective, is that Antigonus is not mentioned as one of those 4 heads that the book of Daniel 7:6 talks about. Why? Because you had it to where 3 of those 4 heads, that is to say, Lysimachus, Ptolemy, and Seleucus, defeated Antigonus. And then Lysimachus in 312 BCE winded up having the territory that we call Babylon today, which the Greeks had rule overship, or where the Greeks had rule over. All right? So now, getting back into this portion right here, it says this. After this, in verse 6, it says, after this I beheld, and lo, another, a leopard, which had upon the sides of it 4 wings of a fowl, and the beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. So now, how does this all tie in? Because the Greek Empire comes up, and then we see our friend, who they like to call Ptolemy the First, going against the nation of Israel. If we go, brothers and sisters, into this reference book right here, entitled Josephus, we're going to go into the book of Josephus, and here it's on page 370. Okay, I'll give you the exact chapter when I get to it. Antiquities of the Jews, book 12, chapter 1, in the middle of verse 1. It says this: there is a nation called the nation of the Jews, which inhabit a city strong and great, named Jerusalem. These men took no care, but let it come into the hands of Ptolemy, as not willing to take arms, and thereby they submitted to be under a hard master, by reason of their unseasonable superstition. This is what Agatharides relates of our nation. But when Ptolemy had taken a great many captives, both from the mountainous parts of Judea, and from the places about Jerusalem and Samaria, and the places near Mount Gerizim, he led them all into Egypt and settled them there. So this is talking about Ptolemy the First, who they call Ptolemy Soter. All right, so let that be noted and understood in history. Okay, so now getting on into this particular presentation, continuing on, right? Here's what we see. Ptolemy the First went against Israel, and then after him, his son, you had Ptolemy the Second. That is referred to as Ptolemy Philadelphus. This is the one that commissioned the Israelites to write what you call today the Septuagint. All right. Then you had Ptolemy the Third, and he was the son and successor of Ptolemy the Second, and he actually wanted to go against the nation of Israel in war. Now, if we will, brothers and sisters, I have for a reference quote. It is entitled the Zondervan Pictorial Encyclopedia of the Bible, and we're going to read something about Ptolemy the Third. Okay? And here is what we read concerning this particular subject right here. Okay, let me get to the page. What that book right there is basically saying is that Ptolemy the Third wanted to go and make war against the Israelites. And so that right there has been recorded within history. So let that be noted and understood. So now, the Greek Empire came up in 331 BCE and fell to the Romans in what they call the battle with Corinth, or in Corinth, what they call the battle of Pydna, when Perseus of Corinth lost to the Roman army. And Rome then comes up as an empire in the year 146 BCE until the fall of the Western Roman Empire in the year 476 BCE. So now, all these particular Ptolemies and the issue with Antiochus and all of that, the Israelites was already being scattered from one part of their own known world to the other. So let that be noted and understood. That right there is very important for us to note and take heed to. Now, here comes the juice of the matter. Let's go into the book of the Apocrypha, if we will. First Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 53. So we can gain an understanding concerning this kind of matter. We are in the first Maccabees, chapter 1, 53, and it says the following. And drove the Israelites into secret places, even wheresoever they could flee for security. Now, let that be noted. This is during what happened when the era with Antiochus, right? And he was part of the Seleucid people. This is Antiochus the fourth era. Now, keep your hand or keep your mind there, that is. And let's go to the book of First Maccabees, chapter 15, verse 22. We are in First Maccabees, 15th chapter. We're going to start in the 22nd verse. And it reads as follows. The same things wrote he likewise unto Demetrius the king, and Attalus, and Ariathes, and Arases, and to all the countries, and to Sampsames, and the Lacedaemonians, and to Delus, and to Mindas, and to Sicyon, and to Korea, and Samos, and Pamphylia, and Lycia, and Halicarnassus, and Rhodes, and Phasaelis, and Kos, and Sidon, and Aridus, and Gortina, and Nidus, and Cyprus, and Cyrene. So I apologize for not fully pronouncing all of the words right, but this is basically talking about the Israelites that was scattered in different parts of the Greco world. So now, when somebody says, knowing good and well that the Greek Empire came up after the Medo-Persian Empire, and they're teaching, brothers and sisters, that the first gathering happened during the Medes and the Persians, and we still see Israelites scattered during the Greek Empire, somebody's not giving accurate information. Because you know what it is? Isaiah 11, verse 11 and 12, guess what? Has not come to pass yet. That day has not come to pass yet. And so that's why it's very important to let it be noted and understood what we're talking about and what we're explaining. Okay, now, let's go back into the book of Daniel, chapter 7, verse 7. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces, and stamped the residue with its feet. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Now, this is talking about the Roman Empire. So now we already seen inside of the Apocrypha, how in the world did Israelites get over into Greek provinces, and so forth and so on. Let's go, keep your hand on Daniel chapter 7, verse 7. And then now let's go, if we will, into the book of Joel, we're going to go to the book of Joel, chapter 3, verse 1. So we can gain some understanding concerning this kind of matter. We are in the book of Joel, the 3rd chapter. We're going to start in verse 1. And it reads as follows. Thank you for bearing with me with the time. We are in the book of the prophet Joel, so we can see what in the world is going on concerning this kind of matter right here. I'm in my scriptures. We are in Joel chapter 3, verse 1. And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions. And upon all the servants and upon the handmaids, and whose in those days will I pour my spirit, and I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. No, I'm sorry. We're going to go into Joel chapter 3, verse 5 and 6 in the King James Version. It says, for behold, in those days and at that time will I bring back the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, and I will gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there, for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and divided my land. And they have cast lots for my people, and have given a boy for a harlot, and sold a girl for wine that they might drink. And also, what are ye to me, O Tyre and Zidon, and all the regions of Philistia? Will ye render retribution on my behalf? And if ye render retribution on my behalf, swiftly, speedily will I return your retribution on your own head. For as much as you have taken my silver and my gold, and have carried away into your temples my goodly treasures, the children also of Judah and the people of Jerusalem have you sold unto the sons of the Grecians, that ye might remove them far from their border. Behold, I will stir them up from out of the place where you have sold them, and will return your retribution upon your own head. So what we're reading right there in the book of Joel chapter 3 has not come to pass yet fully. The tribe of Judah in the captivity of Jerusalem, the house of Israel, has not been returned back into their land yet. That's not what happened in 1945. That's not what happened in 1948. Those were the people of Esau that went into the land of Israel then, not the people of Israel. And this is why you don't see them doing any of the prophecies that you see that's supposed to be happening when the true house of Israel gets there, when you read Ezekiel chapter 37. Israel is, on a human level, supposed to be having what you call a monarchy, not a democracy. Monarch means there's going to be a monarch. Who is of the seed of King David among the Ashkenazi or among the Sephardic that's going to be on the throne of Israel? Not there. You know why? Because they're not the people of the house of Judah. That's why they're not setting up the line of King David. The priests, when you go into the book of Ezekiel chapter 47 and Ezekiel chapter 48, it says the priests that come out of the line of Zadok shall do the offerings. They're not doing no offerings in there in the land of Israel out of the line of Zadok, because they know they're not the people of Zadok. That is a religion to them. That is a faith to them. That is not an ethnic culture to them. That is a distinct difference. They are a people that is not of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that is practicing a ways of another people. So let that be noted and understood. All right. Now, we read in the book of Joel that there were certain nations, and some of those nations, that is to say, Zidon and the people of Philistia and so forth, those are some of the Hamitic, not all, but some of the Hamitic nations that is recorded for selling the tribe of Judah to the Europeans. So history actually repeated itself if you know what happened in history, because the Spanish people, or the people of Spain or Tarshish, they descended from Javan. Javan is Greeks, because when you go into the book of Daniel and you read the word Yawan, or in the English Javan, and when you go into your Bible dictionary, it will tell you that Javan is Greece. Javan sired the guy who we call Tarshish. When you go into your Bible dictionaries, you will sit there and see that Tarshish is Spain. Spain set off the slave trade. Who did the Spanish do league with to sell the children of Judah far off from their land? Black man, woman, and child in the Americas. Now, some people sit there and say, oh, that's just speculation. That can't be proven. The people who don't believe in the scriptures also say that the scriptures are speculation. It cannot be proven. But the slave trade can be proven. Who sold who to who can be proven. The fact that they're not in the African society saying, I'm talking about the particular ones who sold our people, are not saying come back home. Yes, there are Israelites still over in Western Africa. But my point, brothers and sisters, is this. In speaking about us over here inside of the Western Hemisphere, they know they was not selling their own people. They know they were selling the people that came from a faraway country. And this is why when they did a thing, and they did a thing on CNN, and the reporter asked the guy, well, why would you sell your own people? And the guy said, we didn't sell our own. No, we sold those who we captured in war and those who came from a far country. So Africans did not sell Africans. They were Hamitic people that were selling the tribe of Judah and the nation of Israel to the Europeans. So something like that should be noted and understood. Now, getting back into where we go into the book of Daniel, chapter 7. It might seem like I'm going from BCE AD. What I'm attempting to do in this kind of form of presentation is show how the history in Deuteronomy 28 matched up. And all these curses shall come upon thee and shall pursue and overtake thee. Remember what Solomon said. If Israel be delivered to the hand of their enemy. Remember what Daniel said, that we, Israel, have gone astray from the ways of the Most High. So the curse was upon the house of Israel. Daniel chapter 9, verse 11, one more time, so we can gain understanding, so people won't think I'm just talking. It says this, yea, all Israel have transgressed thy law, and have turned aside, so as not to hearken to thy voice. And so there have been poured out upon us the curse, that is the curse and the oath, that is written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, for we have sinned against him. So all the Israelites, when they were saying that the captivities came upon them, they looked to the records that the prophet Moshe had left. And we can do the same thing if you look at Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter. Do you think that the children of Israel was called the children of Israel while they was in Babylon? Or do we see that Daniel was given a name from the king of Babylon? When you go into Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Belteshazzar. So the people of Judah that was in the Babylonian captivity was given names outside of their own names. So that is how you can trace Deuteronomy 28th chapter, where it distinctly says what? Thou shalt become a byword, what it says, and thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword. That's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That's Dwayne. That's John. That's Chris. That's your friend Ralph. That our ancestors never heard these kind of names. That's Judas Maccabeus, Simon Maccabeus, Matthias Maccabeus. The names that the Israelites had under the Greek time. That's Esther and Mordecai. The Persian names that the Israelites had under the Persian time. All of these things, and it says all these curses shall come upon thee and shall pursue and overtake thee. This is how we can trace that. Remember, we just read in the book of Daniel that it says all the curses that are written in this, that's written in the law of Moses. Not too hard to figure out exactly what that is talking about. Understand? So now, can I be heard? Okay, let's move on. We are in the era now, speaking of the Roman Empire. Now, remember we spoke about the situation with, in the last presentation I did with the brother Alvin, and about how the Romans and the Edomites were buddies and how they were friends. Remember how we read in Ian Wilson's book about how the Israelites were fearful of the Edomites coming into that land? That the Israelites were fearful of the Edomites coming into their land. And then that's why I showed the Macmillan Bible Atlas that showed during the time when the Greeks were ruling, you had the people with Idumea, or the Edomites, right inside the land. The original land of Edom wasn't there. They moved up inside of that. So now, with that being the case, let's go, if you will, to the book of Ezekiel, the 35th chapter. Because we distinctly see and read in the book of Jeremiah 49, and we read in the book of Obadiah chapter 1, emphatically what it says about Edom being thieves of the house of Israel. It says this in Ezekiel chapter 35, verse 1. Moreover, the word of the Most High came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Mount Seir and prophesy against it, and say unto it, Thus saith the Most High God, Behold, I am against thee, O Mount Seir, and I will stretch out my hand against thee, and will make thee most desolate. And I will lay thy cities waste, and thou shalt be desolate, and thou shalt know that I am the Most High, because thou hast had an hatred of old, and hast hurled the children of Israel unto the power of the sword, in the time of their calamity, in the time of the iniquity of the end. Meaning that when the time of the iniquities of Israel came to its end, this is when Edom decided to say, oh, it's time for me to shine. Here's what it says. Therefore, as I live, saith the Most High, I will prepare thee unto blood, and blood shall pursue thee. Surely thou hast hated thine own blood, therefore blood shall pursue thee. What comes around goes around. Thus I will make Mount Seir most desolate, and cut off from it him that passeth through, and him that returneth. And I will fill his mountains with his slain, and it says, in thy hills and in thy valleys, and in all thy streams, they shall fall that are slain with the sword. And I will make thee perpetual desolations, and thy cities shall not return, and ye shall know that I am the Most High. Because, and here's the reason, here we go, because thou hast said, these two nations and these two countries shall be mine, and we will possess it, whereas Yahweh was there. Therefore, as I live, saith Yah Elohim, I will do according to thine anger and according to thine envy, which thou hast used out of thy hatred against them. And I will make myself known among them when I shall judge thee. And thou shalt know that I am the Most High, that I, the Most High, have heard thy blasphemies, which thou hast spoken against the mountains of Israel, saying, they are laid waste, they are given to us to devour. So what the scriptures in Ezekiel 35 is saying concerning the Edomites, because that's the people of Seir, all right? It says the Edomites were going to be saying, whereas these two nations was there, those two peoples being Israel one, Judah the other, they laid waste now. The true house of Israel is not there. It's given to us, Esau, to devour. Let's see what the Most High God said. And have magnified yourselves against me with your mouth, and have multiplied your words against me. I have heard it. How did they do that? Because they teach that Moses had two different laws, that he had the written law and the oral law. That's how they magnify themselves with their mouths against the Most High. There was no secret law that Moses passed down through sages. The Talmud is a lie. Okay, let's go on. It says, thus saith the Most High, when the whole earth rejoiceth, I will make thee desolate, as thou didst rejoice over the inheritance of the house of Israel, because it was desolate. So will I do unto thee, and thou shalt be desolate, O Mount Seir, and O Edom, even all of it, and they shall know that I am the Most High. And thou, son of man, prophesy unto the mountains of Israel, and say, we are in Ezekiel 36, verse 1. Ye mountains of Israel, hear the word of Yah. Thus saith Yah Elohim, because the enemy has said against you. Then this is what it's saying, the enemy, right? So the scriptures is speaking about Esau as being the enemy of the house of Israel. Let's move on. We're going to go line upon line, precept upon precept, and then show historically how did Edom get in contact with the nation of Israel's substance. It says this, thus saith the Most High, because the enemy has said against you, speaking about the mountains, the land of Israel, right? The enemy being Esau. What did he say? Aha, even the ancient high places are ours in possession. Esau said this now is going to be theirs because the true house of Israel was not there. So now when you're talking about 1948 and 1945 and so forth and so on, that's not the people of Israel. They're not setting up nothing that's of the house of Israel because they're not the house of Israel. That's why. All right, it says this. Therefore prophesy and say, thus saith the Most High, because, even because they made you, they Esau, made you, the land of Israel, desolate, and swallowed you up on every side, that you might be a possession unto the rest of the nations, and ye, the land, are taken up in the lips of talkers and the evil report of the people. Therefore, ye mountains of Israel, hear the word of Yah Elohim. Thus saith Yah Elohim to the mountains, to the rivers, to the streams, and to the valleys, and to the desolate wastes, and to the cities that are forsaken, meaning forsaken of the true Israelites, which are become a prey and derision to the residue of the nations that are round about, the Nabateans, the Ishmaelites, the Edomites, the Idumeans, the people of Javan, the Greeks, the people of Tiras, the Romans. It says that the land of Israel was left as a desolate place, and it was the land of Israel. If we read in Ezekiel 36, it says the land was taken up in a list of talkers. Who are the talkers? The United States government of today, because they were the ones with the United Nations that sat there and said, okay, we give you, Jewish man, that particular land. That is how the land of Israel was taken up in the lists of talkers. The true house of Israel is not the people you see running the land there. You understand? Benjamin Netanyahu is not a Hebrew Israelite. He is not from the 12 tribes of Israel. Yitzhak Shamir is not from the 12 tribes of Israel. Regardless of how much Hebrew verbs you can sit there and speak on, you are not the lineal people of the Israelites. No more than I am part of the kingdom of England, regardless of how much English I speak. Okay, so let that be noted and understood. Now, we're going to go back and see what this saying right here. Ezekiel chapter 36, we're going to start now in verse 2, and then correlate it back to Deuteronomy 28, and then see how it all matches up with the Roman Empire and what happened. Because remember, we read, according to Tony Thorpe, quoting Dr. Ben, one of their famous scholars that the Jewish man loves, actually, by the way, and he's saying that that the children of Israel migrated to Western Africa. We did report upon report upon report upon presentation concerning that. As a matter of fact, go into this book right here so we can sit there and see something else. This is J.A. Rogers and his book 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro with Complete Proof. We're going to go on page 33 and see what it says. It says, Weisberg says of the Falasha Jews. Now, we read this in the other part, but I wanted to show the point again. They are of the Negro type. The large lips, the pronasticism, and frizzy hair all point to the Negro origin. So Falasha Jews, quote unquote, who call themselves Beta Yisrael, they live in Gondar, which is in Ethiopia. Cush is Ethiopia. Isaiah 11 mentions Israelites in the land of Cush. I have seen the Falashas in Abyssinia and the Negro Jews in Egypt and in Sudan. West Africa has black Jews also. So I want to sit there, hold on. We're going to sit there and see. This is a quote from a famous scholar. It says what? In quote, West Africa has black Jews also. So, with that being the case, and when you go into a book entitled Ethiopia, Forgotten History of Africa, you begin to see, brothers and sisters, that there were Israelites all in that particular area, in that particular region. We already went over, not to be redundant, with Babylon and Timbuktu, by root of Windsor. I mean, speak about the Israelites in Yathrib, and the Israelites in Yemen, and the Israelites in Oman, and so forth and so on. And how a lot of those people that were in there scattered to western portions of Africa. Because if you understand anything about the Nazima, they state that they come from the land of the East. The Yoruba, they state they come from the land of the East. The Igbo, I mean, hands down, there's books about them talking about they the house of Israel. They were Igbo people, according to the guy Daniel P. Mannix in his book Black Cargoes, that was taken to Jamaica as slaves. When you read a book entitled African People and European Holidays by Ishaka Musa Bawashango, he speaks about how the Igbo people in Jamaica did a revolt, and then the guy that they call Daddy Sharp, or some people in Jamaica to this day refer to the guy as Sharp. Those are part of the scattered tribes of Israel that was taken captive by their enemies to the land of the enemies, that the thing that Solomon spoke about. So now let's get back into this. So now we see that the house of Israel, the true Israelites, were scattered out of their land. And that's how Ezekiel chapter 36 verse 2 matches up. It says, thus saith the Lord God, because the enemy have said against you, meaning the land of Israel, aha, even the high places are ours in possession. That means the land of Israel is given to the enemies for a length of time. It says what? Therefore prophesy and say, thus saith Yah Elohim, even because they have made you, the land, desolate, and swallowed you up on every side, that you might be in possession unto the rest of the nations, and you are taken up in the list of talkers, the Arabs, the Jewish people. Those people are not the true people. They're both fighting over a land that belongs to neither of them. The true house of Israel, just like the the former president and prime minister of Egypt, said, Ansar Sadat, you never going to have peace there because you left black and you coming back white. So it's not black supremacy. So let that be noted and understood. I have a book here entitled Tacitus, the Histories, right? We'll go into book 5 concerning this. And he gives his explanation on where he feels and where the Romans in his day and time felt about the origin of the people who we call the Israelites. It says the following. It is said that the Jews were refugees from Crete. Now, Crete is the same place as Kaftor, all right? So Kaftor is the place where the Etruscans were in history. The Etruscans were black. Okay, now let's go on. It is said, this is what he is saying that the Romans are saying about the origin of the Israelites. It is said that the Jews are refugees from Crete who settled in the furthest parts of Libya at the time when Saturn was forcibly deposed by Jupiter. Now he's talking about his Roman gods. He's not twisting it, but he's basically speaking to Rome or to Romans about what they are saying about the origin of the Israelites, right? So that way the world can have a record about the Roman account of what happened between the Israelites and the Romans. Let's move on. It says, evidence for this is sought in the name Ida, Ida, is a famous mountain in Crete, inhabited by the Idea, Idaei, whose name became lengthened into the foreign form Judea. Others say that in the reign of Isis, the superfluous population of Egypt, under the leadership of Hieronymus and Judah, discharged itself upon the neighboring districts, while there are many who think the Jews are of Ethiopian stock, driven by fear and hatred to emigrate in the reign of King Cepheus. Now, when you read about King Cepheus, this was speaking about a mythological king that was ruling in one of the European countries. So what Tacitus is doing is he's correlating the Greek and Roman names of their gods and so forth and so on to sit there and show where they're saying that the true house of Israel came from. So the Romans can understand from their point. Just as much if I were to write a book and say that the American white man, he basically came from the place called England. But he didn't come from England. He came from Amsterdam because it was called Amsterdam at the time. That is why chronology, etymology, geography, and the names of places and timeline is important. So now, in order to get a good understanding, it says that in here it says, while there are many who think that the Jews are of Ethiopian stock, the Jews are of Ethiopian stock. The Jews, the house of Israel, were people of color. This is Tacitus in 90 AD. 20 years after Titus destroyed Jerusalem. 19 years after he made the triumph in Rome. And during the era of Domitian, who was the brother of Titus, the people of Rome were saying that they felt that the Jews were a people of Ethiopian stock. Ethiopia, it comes from the Greek word eti and ops, burnt face. There's no way in the world that the children of Israel were mistaken as coming from the place of burnt faces and were Caucasian at the same time. All right, so now let's continue on in what we was presenting, brothers and sisters. We see that the Edomites in history were linked with the Romans. Now, some of the Roman leaders that were very influential in reference with the Israelites were Pompey, because he made Judah and Jerusalem a Roman province in the year 65 or in the year 63 BCE. And that also ended the Hasmonean rulership. All right? For those who are familiar with history. Pompey, later on, not the direct, but the later on successor, was the god Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar and Antipater were friends. Antipater was an Idumean. Idumea, we already went over, as Esau. So now we see the league later on, before the Roman Empire, and actually doing what you call the Roman Republic, where the children of Esau and the Romans were friends. That's important, because Julius Caesar and Antipater were friends. Then, when Julius Caesar was assassinated, we later on see that Antipater's son, actually no, when Antipater passed away, Herod and Julius Caesar were then friends. And then Julius Caesar was assassinated. So then Herod, as we went over before, when you go in Michael Grant's book entitled History of Israel, the people of Herod, the Idumean, the son of Antipater, was friends with Julius Caesar. Then, after Julius Caesar's assassination, the Edomites under Herod linked up and decided to become friends with who we call Antony. This is the husband of Cleopatra. Okay? And then they also, when Octavian, who later on became Augustus, defeated Mark Antony and Cleopatra, Herod is now friends with the Romans under Augustus. And Augustus, also known as Octavian, was the leader of the first part of the Roman Empire. So now, the situation now goes down after the situation with Augustus. He passes away, then you have Tiberius. Then Tiberius passes away. And the successor of Tiberius was the freak and the homosexual and the faggot, you understand, and the incestor and the murderer Caligula. You know, the one who murdered his brother-in-law when his sister was pregnant. Then when his sister gave birth to a girl, he was saying that the girl was a boy. And so, yeah, that Caligula, the one that the movie showed, and they were doing all kinds of weird acts, okay? We want to keep it clean. That same Caligula. He was friends in history with Agrippa the First. Agrippa the First was the grandson of Herod the Great. So this is where it's important to let it be noted and understood. That's why timeline is important. So whenever the leader of a people is friends with a leader of another people, you obviously know the people that are subjugated under each of those rulers are also in unison. You understand? In most cases, and certainly in this case. So now you have Caligula, and he is friends with the guy Agrippa of the house of Esau. So here you got Rome and Esau again in a conglomerate organization. So now, let's understand that Caligula, before he was assassinated by the Romans and everything like that, he wanted to have his image put up inside the temple in Jerusalem. But the Israelites would rather sit there and fight as opposed to going out like that. So now Caligula is assassinated when he returns from a banquet, all right, in the year 41 AD. And his uncle then becomes the successor, and his name is Caligula. Pardon me, and his name is Claudius. This is the same Claudius that we went over in the Alvin presentation when me and the brother Mikael was going and talking about Deuteronomy 28 verse 68 and going over the Romans and everything like that. The Edomites were in league with the Romans. I just wanted at this time to name the names of what we're talking about. Because remember, we see Esau is Idumea. Idumea is Edom. Edom was the people Ezekiel, the Hebrew Israelite prophet, was saying they wanted the land of Israel. And since they're not doing the prophecies that the house of Israel is supposed to be doing, but rather doing the prophecies that the Edomites are doing, you see exactly who is who. Yitzhak Shamir is not of the 12 tribes of Israel. Let's get history in focus. Now, Agrippa and Caligula were friends. And then you have Caligula's successor, as we stated, was Claudius. Claudius and Herod II were friends. Now, let's understand that Agrippa and Herod II were brothers. All right, so let that be noted and understood. So Claudius, he passes away, and then Nero comes up into power. And this is now when we get into a very, very touchy issue concerning this kind of subject matter right here. Because remember, if we remember that Pompey was assassinated in the land of Egypt, Nero assassinated his own mother. Nero assassinated his own wife. Nero was in league and was friends, brothers and sisters, with the Edomites, with Herod's family. So now, when the Israelites, the true house of Israel, was revolting under the Roman oppression and everything like that, Nero, who was the leader of the Romans, sent his man Vespasian to try to quell the house of Israel. And this is when we start to see the attacks that was done on Jotapata, on Gomorrah, on what you call Samaria, on what you call Masada later on with Titus, and upon Jerusalem. And so what many people unfortunately try to do is link Deuteronomy 28 verse 68. And I did a discussion, no, not to blow up anybody's name, because we all grown men and we all in our hearts want the best for our people, but to put history in focus. And that is the fact of saying that some people are then to attempt to state that the Israelites were then taken, according to records, by Titus into the land of Egypt, which emphatically, so far, the evidence has not been shown of that in presentations. To say that somebody named Mutzer or somebody named Emil Schuler said that, oh, okay, the Romans took people by ship, or the people of the Jews were taken by ship, that's not connecting it with Titus. See, if you're going to sit there and state that it's Titus, then you got to sit there and show the evidence that says, and Titus took the people by ships. Because I can show you where history shows that John Hawkins took people of the Ashanti into Jamaica under the British. Those names I can connect with the good ship Jesus. You can sit there and show how that evidence is there. So now, getting back into the point of this, we're now dealing with the Roman Empire. So now we got it to where Nero is ruling, and Nero commits suicide in the year 68 or 69, pardon me, in the year 68 AD. You understand? And then you got a Roman leader named Vitellius or Vitellius, and he and Vespasian are actually at war one with another, while Titus, brothers and sisters, is sent by his father to try to quell the people of Israel from rebellion. Now, getting back, brothers and sisters, into the book of Tacitus, book of the wars, Tacitus, book 5, right? We're going to see what it says. In the same year, Titus Caesar had been entrusted by his father with the task of completing the reduction of Judea. While he and his father were both still ordinary citizens, Titus had distinguished himself as a soldier. Now, his efficiency and reputation was steadily increasing, while the provinces and armies vied one with another in their enthusiasm for him. Wishing to seem independent of his good fortune, he always showed dignity and energy in the field. His affable and friendly conversation called forth devotion. He regularly mingled with his soldiers and at their duties or on the march without compromising his dignity as a general. 3 legions awaited for him in Judea, the 5th, the 10th, and the 15th, all veterans from his father's army. These were reinforced by the 12th from Syria and by the detachments of the 22nd and 23rd brought over from Alexandria. Let's remember what's going on. It says that when Titus went up against the people of Judah and Jerusalem, that you had what they call the 22nd and the 23rd infantry brought from Alexandria, right? That's Alexandria in the land of Egypt. How did they go from Alexandria to the land of Egypt to go and be part of the attack upon Judea unless they went over to Sinai? Let's move on. It says the following. This force was accompanied by the 20 auxiliary cohorts and 8 regiments of cavalry, as also Kings Agrippa and Sahamis and auxiliaries from King Antiochus, a strong force of Arabs who had the hatred for the Jews, usually between Rome and the rest of Italy, each tempted by their hope of securing their first place in the empire's still unoccupied affections. So basically, Ezekiel 36, when it says that the land of Israel was left as the residue to the nations, this is the Arabs that was also in league with the people of Esau. Because let's remember now, if you know history, that Vespasian is the father of Titus. Agrippa II, who was the leader of the Edomites, and Melchus II, who was the leader of the Nabateans, were friends with the Romans. The Ishmaelites and the Edomites were friends with the Romans against the true house of Israel. The pestilence shall cleave unto thee, and shall consume thee from off the land, whether you go in to possess it. Let's move on. Okay, it says the following. With this force, Titus entered the enemy's country. His column was drawn up in order. He sent out scouts everywhere and held himself ready to fight. He pitched his camp not far from Jerusalem. Let's move on now. I want to sit there and go into another particular subject concerning this, because he goes into the history of what happened with the Israelites and the Romans in a little detail, all right? And here's what he says. The Histories of Tacitus, Book 5, Chapter 9, says, Pompey was the first Roman to subdue the Jews and set foot in the temple by right of conquest. That is the source of information that the temple contained no image of any god. Their shrine was empty, the innermost sanctuary void. The walls of Jerusalem were destroyed, but the temple was left standing. The emperor therefore made Judea a province to be governed by the Roman knights and freedmen. Now this is what we just read about the emperor, therefore made Judea a Roman province. That's talking about what happened with Claudius. All right, so let's move on. It says, because remember, after Claudius came Nero, right? He goes on to say in Book 5, we are in Tacitus, the Histories, Book 5, we are in part 11, and it says this in part. Nero sent out Vespasian, or Vespasian that is, who within 2 summers, thanks to his reputation and good fortune and able subordinates, had the whole of the flat country and all the towns except Jerusalem under the heel of his victorious army. At the same time, it seemed advantageous to leave Titus at the head of the army to meet all the eventualities of the new reign, whether good or bad. So basically, what Tacitus in his book is stating is that the people of the Israelites was subdued by the Romans, and he's naming those Roman leaders by name. Let's go on. And it says this, Book 5, Part 14. It says, Part 13, sorry, in part says this. In the book Tacitus, the Histories, the number of the besieged, men and women of every age, is stated to have been 600,000. They were armed for all that could carry them, and far more were ready to fight than would be expected from their total numbers, such as was the city and such of the people with which Titus Caesar was faced. As the nature of the ground forbade a sudden assault, he determined to employ earthworks and mantlets. The work was accordingly divided among the legions, and there was a respite from fighting until they had got ready every means of storming a town that had ever been devised in the ancient times or by modern ingenuity. Now, brothers and sisters, many times people point out Deuteronomy 28 verse 52 without having understanding. Now, Deuteronomy 28:52, according to some, especially Caucasians who try to attack Israelites on Deuteronomy 28, say that that's talking about the Romans only. From Deuteronomy chapter 52 to Deuteronomy 28:68, they say it's only talking about the Israelites and the Romans. So what we're going to do is go flip-flopping back and forth in the scriptures, line upon line, and see how the history connects and how somebody done lied on somebody. Deuteronomy 28:52 says this, and he, meaning the enemy, and he shall besiege thee in all thy gates, until thy high and fortified walls come down, wherein thou didst trust throughout all thy land. And he shall besiege thee and all thy gates throughout all thy land, which the Lord thy God hath given thee. Let's go to 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 31. We are in 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 31. This is what we're going to read, something that happened before the Romans, right? It says, and when he had taken the spoils of the city, he set it on fire and pulled down the houses and walls thereof on every side. But the women and children took they captive and possessed the cattle. So this is still talking about the situation that happened with Antiochus. This is talking about the era what happened with Antiochus. This is the Greek Empire. 1 Maccabees chapter 1:31, where it says, and when he had taken the spoils of the city, he set it on fire and pulled down the houses and walls thereof on every side. So when it says about being besieged, you can't just try to sit there and trace that to what happened with Rome, because it happened to the Israelites prior to the Roman Empire coming in contact with the Israelites. So line upon line, let's understand what's going on, right? Let's go back. Deuteronomy 28:52, according to those who like to say what they say. And he shall besiege thee in all thy gates until thy high and fortified walls come down, wherein thou didst trust throughout all thy land. And he shall besiege thee in all thy gates throughout all thy land, which the Lord thy God hath given thee. Now, in being fair and not being biased, let's go to the book of Josephus, if we will. We in the book of Josephus, book of the wars, right? The wars of the Jews. We are in book 6. We're going to start in chapter 9. It says, this is what Titus said concerning this kind of matter. He says, we have certainly had God for our assistant in this war, and it was none other than God who ejected the Jews out of these fortifications. For what could have the hands of men or any machines do towards overthrowing these towers? At which time he had made such discoveries to his friends. He also let go such free as had been bound by the tyrants and were left in the prisons. So what we just read is that Titus was actually speaking about how they overcame the walls that was in Jerusalem. So that right there is very, very important to let it be noted and understood of what we're talking about. So to try to trace Deuteronomy 28 verses 52 only into verse 68 and say that's talking about the Romans, that's historically inaccurate. And how we know that is because it says that you shall be taught a wife and another man shall lie with her. Titus, as well as many of his soldiers, was dealing with women that was of the Israelites. Even Titus had an Israelite woman for himself named Berenice, Berenice, when you study history. So now if we were to say, according to some on YouTube, that Deuteronomy 28 verse 52 to verse 68 is talking about primarily and only about Israel and the Romans, that means by default you're saying from verse 51 and before that can't be talking about the Romans. So how then do you see Israelite women being with the men of other nations during the time of the Roman Empire when verse 32 is the verse that talks about that? It says emphatically that the wives and the children were taken into captivity by the Romans. When you go into the book of Josephus, let's go back. We are in the book of Josephus, Wars of the Jews, book 6, chapter 8, says in part, for they left only the populace and sold the rest of the multitude, meaning they sold the rest of the multitude as slaves, with their wives and children, and every one of them at a very low price. And that because of such as was sold were very many, and the buyers very few. And although Titus had made proclamation beforehand that no deserter should come alone by himself, so that they might bring out their families with them, yet he did receive such as these also. Pay attention, brothers and sisters. However, he set over them such as were to be distinguished, some from others, in order to see if any of them deserve to be punished. Let's go on and see this. And indeed, the number of those that were sold was immense, but the populace above 40,000 was saved, whom Caesar let go whether every one of them pleased. So now we see in the year 70 AD, 71 AD, that not all the Israelites were sold as slaves because he let some of them go. So that right there just goes to show you an account of what happened. So if you understand what happened with Titus, he had an Israelite women. Many of the Roman people at that time also was dealing in raping the Israelite women and so forth and so on. So you can't trace what we read in Deuteronomy 28 verse 30, which is before verse 52, and then say that that's talking about the Israelites and Romans too, unless you understand what verse 45 is saying, because it says all these curses shall come upon thee and shall pursue and overtake thee. You see, so trying to trace it back to just Rome from verse 52 is not accurate. Now, I did a presentation and spoke with a brother about this kind of matter, and this verse was presented by somebody by saying, well, you know, you're saying that Deuteronomy 28 is about the people in America, but he didn't give you the people in America, this land. And what, did they have any wars in America? See, this is what happens when you don't understand the scriptures. Because in Proverbs, because see, first off, if you don't even believe in the scriptures, or if you don't believe in the Bible, Psalms chapter 50 says, what have the wicked to declare my statutes? So everybody, if you not even call upon the Most High God of Israel, you're not going to understand the book of the God of Israel. Let that be noted and understood, hands down. Now, secondly, getting back to what we're talking about. when you're dealing with the aspect in this case with Deuteronomy 28 verse 52, and then the attempt of saying, well, are we saying that that's talking about us in America in that particular form? And that one verse, no, it's not. But it also says all these curses shall come upon thee and pursue and overtake thee. So it pursue you from where? Pursue you from where you've been scattered. That's why you got to keep on reading. Okay? It says what in verse 53? And thou shalt eat the fruit of thine own body, the flesh of thy sons and of thy daughters, whom the Lord thy God hath given thee, in the siege and in the straitness, wherein thine enemy shall straiten thee. The man that is tender among you and very delicate, his eyes shall be evil against his brother, and against the wife of his bosom, and against the remnant of his children whom he hath remaining, so that he will not give to any of them of the flesh of his children whom he shall eat, because he hath nothing left him in the siege and in the straitness, wherein thine enemy shall straiten thee in all thy gates. The tender and delicate women among you, which shall not adventure to set the sole of her foot upon the ground, for delicateness and tenderness, her eyes shall be evil against the husband of her bosom, and against her son, and against her daughter, and against her afterbirth that cometh out from between her feet, and against her children which she shall bear. For she shall eat them for the want of all things in secret, in the siege and in the straitness, wherein thine enemy shall straiten thee in thy gates. If thou wilt not observe to do all the words of this law that are written in this book, that thou mayest fear this glorious and awful name, the Most High your King, then the Most High will make thy plagues wonderful in the plagues of thy seed, even great plagues and of long continuance, and sore sicknesses and of long continuance. This is between the Most High and Israel. Read on. And he will bring back upon thee all the diseases of Egypt, of which thou wast undread of, and they shall cleave unto thee. We went over that aspect, the diseases of Egypt, like the Pharaoh and the hardened heart. Alrighty, verse 61. Also, every sickness and every plague which is not written in the book of this law, them will the Most High bring upon thee until thou be destroyed. And ye shall be left few in number, whereas you were as the stars of heaven for multitude, because you did not hearken unto the voice of the Most High your King. And it shall come to pass that as Yah rejoiced over you to do you good and to multiply you, so the Most High will rejoice over you to cause you to perish and to destroy you. And you shall be plucked from off the land, whether you go in to possess it. And the Most High shall scatter you among the peoples, from one end of the earth even to the other end of the earth. And there you shall serve other gods, which thou nor thy fathers have known, even when it's stone. It said Israel was going to be scattered from one end of the earth unto the other. So, if that's the case, let's see what's happening in verse 52. The walls came down, and the people were scattered. And the people were left few in number among the different nations. And they were carried captive far into the land of the enemies. When you go into the book of 1 Kings chapter 8:46, Solomon spoke about that. All right, we went over that. It says in verse 65, Deuteronomy 28:65, and among these nations you shall find no repose, neither shall rest, neither shall there be, and among these nations you shall have no repose, and there shall be no rest for the sole of your foot. But the Most High shall give thee there a trembling heart, filling of eyes, and languishing of soul. Do we understand what's being stated? We know what languishing of soul is. I don't know what I'm going to do today. I'm like the blind that gropeth about in darkness. I don't know where I see myself in 5 years. Because your soul is languishing because you don't know what in the world is going on. You have no kind of identity of self. When it says languishing of soul, when your soul has become languished, it is gone. It is destroyed. You have no soul after a while. What happened with our people over here? We lost our soul, man. And so we transformed it to music, and we transformed it to dancing, and we transformed it and said this is food because we're still trying to have it for the want of all things in secret. We're still trying to sit there and latch on to something because the Most High has smitten us with madness, blindness, and astonishment of heart. The Sephardic Jews cannot say that they had a languishing of soul. And it says what? And failing of eyes, meaning where you don't see where in the world the future is going to go into. You understand? And a trembling of heart. So there you got the trembling of heart. Then you got failure of eyes, no vision. You're scared as who knows what. and you ain't got no soul, you ain't got no spirit, there's nothing to you, there's no substance. Nobody looks to our people for anything, for an upliftment. And it might sound harsh, and it means no disrespect intended, but what it boils down to, like Shahrazad Ali said, if you take away basketball and football, where is the black man? Sound harsh, but it's the truth. It says what? And thy life shall hang in doubt before thee, and thou shalt fear night and day, and shall have no assurance of your life. In the morning thou shalt say, would it were even? And at even you shall say, would it were morning? For the fear of thine heart which thou shalt fear, and for the sight of thine eyes which thou shalt see. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt in ships, by the way whereof I said unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again. And there you shall sell yourselves unto your enemies, for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Okay, it says what? And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt in ships. Verse 64 says, and the Lord shall scatter thee among all peoples. So Israel scattered, all right? The wall done came down already in verse 52. The broken up families and all these curses shall pursue and overtake thee. So we still see the broken families from verse 56, 57, 58, as well as in 55. All right? So now it goes on to say in verse 64, the Lord shall scatter thee among all peoples. Because remember, it says Israel in verse 62 is going to be left few in number. So your walls done came down around your city. You done lost your land. You understand? And then it says that you shall be scattered among the nations from one end of the earth to the other. And it says, among those nations you shall find no rest for the sole of your foot. And you shall have there a failing of eyes, languishing of soul, and a trembling heart. And at night you would say, I wish it was day. And at day you say, wow, I wish it was night. And while you are in the land of your enemies, it says this will happen. And the Lord shall bring thee back into Egypt in ships. So how can we trace and say that Deuteronomy 28:68 is talking about the Israelites that dealt with Titus in Rome, when Titus in Rome could have not been the people around when the Israelites was already scattered? Because Josephus distinctly speaks about how Israelites was taken from Egypt into Rome by ship. This is why getting your history important is very, very important. Let it be noted and understood, brothers and sisters. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but if my timeline is not off, brothers and sisters, the siege of Jerusalem was completed within 5 months of it being taken over from what you call May of 70 AD or 70 CE of the Common Era. Okay, now if you're taking it from that point, 5 months later, you got May, there's June, there's July, there's August, there's September, and there's October. October is the beginning of winter. So let that be noted and understood. The Romans wasn't really using ships during the winter time, if you know anything about the Roman Navy. So somebody has to come with a better source. Okay. Now let's get back. So understanding it from the Israelite mind, we went over the issue of Mizraim, the Matzoriam, and so forth and so on. We went over that over and over and over and over again. Now, however, for edification purposes, I would like to sit there and take the time and bear with me, because I got to get up to get this book right here. So that way we can see exactly what we're speaking of from an Israelite perspective. Because you can't look at Egypt from a political perspective. In that case, you got to look at it from an Israelite perspective in that case. So let that be noted and understood. And this is how you know, because Egypt was called a rib when you go to the book of Daniel, chapter 7, verse 5. So the Israelites, no offense intended, did not have to be what you call, quote unquote, politically correct. You understand? So let that be noted and understood. It's just like the Hebrews were inclusive of the Phoenicians that Herodotus spoke about. The Phoenicians the term Phoenicia is a Greek term that was applied to the Zidonians and the Israelites that was in that particular area. So that's why we have to know and understand who is the speaker, who is the first, second, and third person inside of a conversation. I have the Strong's Concordance. I'm going to go into the Hebrew part because they say they translate the words and everything like that. And I'm going to go to page 84 in this. We're going to look up the word Matzor and see what this says. Right? Okay, because we went over this before and described how Zar leads you to Zara. Zara leads you to Matzir. Matzir leads you to Matzor. Matzor leads you to Mizraim or Matzraim. So let's see what Matzor means, right? It says Matzor. The meaning of it is something hemming, a mound of sieges, a siege, distress, a fastness, besiege, a bulwark, a defense, fence, fortress, siege, stronghold, tower, Matzor. The same as 4692. In the sense of limit, Egypt as the border of Palestine. Oh, what did we just read? It distinctly says Egypt as the border of Palestine. So, understanding that when the Israelites used the term Matzorayim, the reason why they're calling that is because that was part of their borders and part of their straits. Straits, in that case, is a bad thing. Distress, we already seen this inside the same book. And for those who say they didn't see it or don't know what I'm talking about, here is the source right here, the Strong's Concordance. This is known by many people. This is the Hebrew definition side. And under Matzor, Mebzadeh Waresh, right? We see as Matzor or Matzur both being the same word. All right. We see emphatically it says besiege, bulwark, defense, fence, fortress, siege, stronghold, tower, distress, siege. So that way it can be noted the distress of the Yam. Yam in Hebrew means sea. The distress of the sea. That is what the Israelites called that particular land. So when if you were to go and were to translate from the ancient Hebrew the word Mizraim into the word Egypt, you're putting your Greek spin upon it because Egypt is the English form of the Egyptian, pardon me, Egypt is the English form of the Greek Egyptos. And Egyptos is from an Egyptian term that they call Hukapta or Menofer for the city of Memphis. We already went over all of that. So, in concluding, in order I get understanding, and I'm open to constructive criticism, let's state for the record, going back into the scriptures, if we will, the book of Isaiah 11, verse 11. And here is what we read. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Most High will set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people that shall remain from Assyria and from Egypt and from Pathros and from Cush and from Elam and from Shinar and from Hamath and from the islands of the sea. And he shall set up an ensign for the nations and will assemble the dispersed of Israel and gather together the scattered of Judah from the four corners of the earth. To the people who sit there and teach, brothers and sisters, Isaiah 11, verse 11 and 12, believe it or not, has not come to pass yet. So let that be noted and understood. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 43, verse 6. The book of the prophet Yeshayahu, 43, verse 6. And here is what we read. And we're about to conclude. Thank you for the time and the patience. And those who listened to me in the past, you know, in other times I was much more fast in speaking. I'm trying to speak slower for edification purposes. Isaiah 43 verse 6 says this: I will say to the north, give up, and to the south, keep not back. Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the end of the earth. I will say to the north, give up, and to the south, keep not back. Matter of fact, let's go to Isaiah 43 verse 1 so we can see who is being the speaker and who is being the spoken to. But now thus saith the Lord, Yah is speaking, that created thee, O Jacob. Okay, so it's the Most High speaking to Jacob, right? Let's move on. And he that formed thee, O Israel, fear not, for I have redeemed thee. I have called thee by thy name, thou art mine. When thou passest through the waters, I will be with thee. And through the rivers, they shall not overflow thee. When thou walkest through the fire, thou shalt not be burned, neither shall the flame kindle upon thee. For I am Yah Eloheka. I am the Lord thy God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. I have given Egypt as thy ransom, Ethiopia and Seba for thee, since thou art precious in my sight and honorable. And I have loved thee. Therefore I have given men for thee and peoples for thy life. And that's why the nations who know who the true house of Israel are hate the house of Israel. It says, since thou art precious in my sight and honorable, and I have loved thee, therefore, while I give men for thee and peoples for thy life, fear not, for I am with thee. For I will bring thy seed from the east and gather thee from the west. So that's why I wanted to point out. It talks about the seed of the house of Israel. So don't come with the concept, oh, we are spiritual Israel. Wrong. There's no such thing as spiritual Israel. Israel needs to be righteous. That's the spirit Israel needs. Uprightness and humility. So there is no such thing as spiritual Israel. Okay, so now Isaiah 43. All right, we're going to go, and it says what again? Fear not, meaning don't be afraid, for I am with thee. I will bring thy seed from the east and gather thee from the west. The west of what? I will say to the north, give up, and to the south, keep not back. Bring my sons from far and my daughters from the end of the earth. So, brothers and sisters, let it be noted and understood, Deuteronomy 28, when it says that Israel will be scattered from one of the earth to the other, and who is the sons of the Most High? Let's go, if we will, Deuteronomy chapter 32, 19. We are in the scriptures, Deuteronomy chapter 32, we are in verse 19. All right, and it reads on this wise. So that way we can gain an understanding concerning this kind of matter. And the Most High saw and spurred because of the provoking of his sons and his daughters. And he said, I will hide my face from them. I will see what their end shall be. For they are a froward generation, children in whom is no faithfulness. They have roused me, meaning they have roused the Most High to jealousy with a no God. They have provoked the Most High with their vanities. And I will rouse them to jealousy with a no people. I will provoke them with a vile nation. So it's a covenant between the Most High and the seed line of the house of Israel. All right, so let's go to Jeremiah chapter 15. We are in Jeremiah chapter 15. We want to go in Jeremiah 15 verse 1. And it says the following. Then the Most High said unto me, though Moses and Samuel stood before me, yet my mind could not be toward this people. Cast them out of my sight, and let them go forth. And it shall come to pass when they say unto thee, where shall we go forth? Then you shall tell them, thus saith the Most High, such as for death to death, and such as for the sword to the sword, and such as for the famine to the famine, and such as for captivity to captivity. And I will appoint over them four kinds, saith the Most High. That is, the sword to slay, the dogs to drag, and the fowls of the heaven, and the beasts of the earth to devour and destroy. And I will cause them to be a horror unto all the kingdoms of the earth, because of Manasseh, the son of Hezekiah, king of Judah, for what he did in Jerusalem. So, after Babylon came up, let's conclude. They took Judah. Israel was already inside of Assyria. So when Assyria lost to Babylon, the Israelites that were already inside of there were already then in Babylon. But let's not forget, at the same token, there were Israelites also scattered into the African places, such as Egypt, Patros, and Cush. You understand? And as we read in Zephaniah chapter 3, it says that from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia shall my suppliance, even the daughter of my dispersed, shall bring my offering. And it goes into Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 14, where it speaks about the scattering of the nation of Israel. And as to say that that is beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. Beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, you're going west. West of that is going into Western Africa. When you sit there and you quote what many scholars sit there and teach, Mungo Park, Leo Scipio Africanus, among other ones, such as Nahum Sot, such as many other ones that's quoted in Babylon and Timbuktu in the book Valley of the Dry Bones, about who were the people that was being sold, were the people of the nation of Israel. That was given bywords and were unfortunately made blind because they went against the laws, the statutes, and the commandments of the Most High God. So, now, you notice, no offense intended, the people who sit there and speak about certain things, they never give a solution about what's going to happen with the house of Israel, because deep down, they don't care about Israelites. They don't like Israelites. They think Israelites are black supremacists and so forth and so on. But these are the people that some people want to sit there and hold in high esteem and sit there and state that they're a good spokesperson. That's ridiculous. The Most High left on record what should be. And it says in Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 1, and it shall come to pass when all these things are come upon thee, the blessing and the curse, which I have set before thee, and thou shalt bethink thyself among the nations, whether the Most High have driven thee, and shalt return unto the Most High thy King, and hearken to his voice according to all that I command thee this day, thou and thy children with all thy heart and with all thy soul. Brothers and sisters, if you're in your history of your people cannot trace about how those curses apply to you, you're not Israel Ashkenaz, and you're not Israel Sepharad, okay? So let that be noted and understood. Because you can't love them and your own people. You notice the people who try to uphold the idea of, oh, it's the Ashkenazi and the Sephardic and the so forth and the so on. You notice they don't say that those people are white supremacists, such as the Ashkenazi Jews, but they say that Israelites are black supremacists. You can't love the enemy and love your own at the same time. All right, so let's go back here. It says, and it shall come to pass when all these things are come upon thee, the blessing and the curse which I have set before thee, and thou shalt bethink thyself among the nations, whither the Most High thy King have driven thee, and shalt return unto the Most High thy King, and hearken to his voice unto all that I command thee this day, thou and thy children with all thy heart and with all thy soul. That then the Lord thy God will turn thy captivity and have compassion upon thee, and will return and gather thee from all the peoples, whither the Most High thy King hath scattered thee. And if any of thine be dispersed in the utmost parts of heaven, from thence will the Most High thy King gather thee, and from thence will he fetch thee. If any of thine that are dispersed be in the utmost parts of heaven, from thence will the Most High gather thee, and from thence will he fetch thee. And the Lord thy God will bring thee into the land which thy fathers possessed, and thou shalt possess it. So it don't matter if the Ashkenazi have a so-called record dating back to the 5th century AD or whatever in the world, or the Sephardic dating back before 1492, and so forth and so on, because you're not the descendants of the people that went in the land with the prophet Moshe. And it says this, and the Lord thy God will bring thee into the land which thy fathers possessed, and thou shalt possess it. Ashkenaz, y'all come out of Germany. Ashkenaz is German, for the most part. That's not even the line of Shem. So that's not the land your fathers possess. The Jordan and the Rhine are two different rivers. All right? And he will do thee good and multiply thee above thy fathers. And the Lord thy God will circumcise thy heart and the heart of thy seed. Here we go with that seed again, right? To love Yah thy power with all thy heart and with all thy soul, that thou mayest live. Here we go. And the Lord thy God will put all these curses upon thine enemies, and on them that hate thee and that persecuted thee. And thou shalt return and hearken unto the voice of the Lord, and do all his commandments, which I command thee this day. And the Lord thy God will make thee overabundant in all the work of thy hand, in the fruit of thy body, and in the fruit of thy cattle, and in the fruit of thy land for good. For the Lord will again rejoice over thee for good, as he rejoiced over thy fathers, if thou shalt hearken unto the voice of the Most High, to keep his commandments, not his Talmud, not his Shulchan Aruch. If you keep his mitzvot, his commandments, and his statutes which are written in this book of the Torah, not the Talmud, if thou shalt turn unto the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul. That is the solution for the black man, woman, and child in the Americas. Shalom.